Hey, yo, real quick, they built real quick, guys, because I gotta go. Sorry, but someone built on us, so if you guys want to keep the node, we have to fight today. Just a heads up. I don't think I can make it though, cause no worries. Nah. Yeah. I just came in to say that, and I'm gonna ping it. I think it's gonna be a siege kill, but we'll see. Yeah, I think it's gonna be villainous. Cause yeah, there's two. They placed last minute as well. Good thing I did put up defense. Yeah, I put up defenses. Well, I put up the defenses, 2 flame towers and everything. Yeah, I know. That's why. Yeah, I wanted it. Okay. All right. Well. Oh, oops.
a ghost out of sight, woke me from dreaming, pulling the scene away, calling me into the night, slowly revealing all that I've kept at bay. Just as a vision takes hold, hinting at flickering gold, shines a light that's here to stay. Somewhere hidden deep in the unseen, hear the voice that is calling, past the doubt and the confusion. Would you leave for a feeling? No, not sure if it's only just a beautiful illusion. Watch it like out of a movie, showing the way that it could be. Moments written in the stars. Saw all the ways we've been holding on, the place where we're standing, stuck in the mold of who we are. Just as a vision takes hold, every hate, yeah, we're striking gold, 'cause we know who we are. Somewhere hidden deep in the unseen, hear the voice that is calling, past the doubt and the confusion. Would you leave for a feeling? You're not sure if it's only just a beautiful illusion. Like a ghost out of sight, woke me from dreaming, pulling the scene away.
What up, everybody? It's Friday. Time for some Science Friday. Let this countdown take us to 0, and then we will begin. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Science Friday. We're gonna get that animation started. Yeah. I am your host, Shark Party, as always. The GG stands for Gaming Grad because I do some gaming streams here from time to time. Not lately. I've been really busy with some stuff in the PhD program. But nonetheless, we're still kind of chugging along here and trying to do these streams whenever we can, as best we can. So I do apologize for missing this past Tuesday. I wasn't able to stream. I have a lot on my plate, and I'll say why in just a second. But yeah, I have a lot on my plate, and so I wasn't able to stream Tuesday. So I do apologize for that. Now, why am I very busy right now? Well, one, I'm still in my doctorate, and there is we're about to start data collection. We're about to launch our experiment, which is really exciting for our team because it's always fun. Hey, what's up, Geeky? Yeah, for sure. Welcome to Science Friday. Thanks for coming. Today we're going to talk about perceptual bias, and so it's probably a term you've heard of before. I talk a lot about it on this channel, but I think it's a really good one. It's a nice default for this channel whenever I feel I haven't talked about this topic for a long time, or yeah, whenever I have absolutely no ideas. Not that today I didn't have ideas, but when I have absolutely no ideas, this is always just a great topic to talk about because it's so broad. There's so much research in bias because you can talk about explicit bias versus implicit bias or implicit bias. We can define bias. We can talk about all the different ways of researching bias and researching both explicit versus implicit bias. Perceptual bias for sure, cognitive biases. There's a lot of things we can talk about with bias. So it's a great topic to sit there and listen. Hopefully, you'll enjoy it. So, but thanks for coming by. And yeah, so anyways, I'm really busy right now because I have not only are we about to launch the experiment for my dissertation. I'm in the middle of my dissertation right now, and if people aren't familiar with that term for dissertation, basically all that means is I'm in kind of like the final phases of my degree, of my PhD. Actually, I'm in the final phase of my PhD, and a dissertation is like a final project. Like, gather all you've learned in all of grad school. I'm going to adjust my camera a little bit. Gather all you've learned in grad school and demonstrate that you know how to do science before we give you your license to science. Just like medical doctors have their medical degree that gives them kind of a license to practice medicine, and lawyers get this Juris Doctorate to kind of give them a license to practice law. Scientists are no different. They get the PhD, which is a philosophical doctorate. So just so you know, like medicine and law and science all have their own doctorates. MD for medicine, medical doctorate. Um, JD for the lawyer, Juris Doctorate, and for scientists, it's the philosophical doctorate because we're looking at theory, right? And so that PhD kind of gives us that license to be the people who are going to tamper with the truth that a society really ultimately believes, right? Because a lot of the times when people don't know, um, when they look for answers, a lot of times it's science, right? So science gets to have that say. So with that being said, and actually today's topic is kind of scary with that in mind. Actually, let's keep that in mind as we talk about today's perceptual bias. So like you can also, I think sometimes people um, treat science as this pure entity, almost like a godlike entity that opposes, classic theology to them. I'm not saying actual science opposes religion in any way, shape, or form. Well, it depends on which religion, because some religions, science would definitely be like, yeah, we have evidence that strongly supports no, that's not how things happen. But we're not here to debate that. What I'm trying to say is some people treat science as this entity, and we have to remember, well, what is science? Science is a community of humans, and humans are prone to error, corruption, greed, negative things, on top, and also positive things, right? We've had brilliant scientists who have shared with us their science with no profit and that came to them. I think there's like a fun factoid about the inventor of penicillin who gave it away for free because he didn't want humanity to pay for it because it's such a boost to humanity. Um, and there's many other people that exhibit really, really good stuff. So science is no different from any other place or any other field or any other group of people because after all, it's people doing the science. And so that is just also a great way of talking about bias because bias is a preference for a certain behavior, for certain whatever it may be. We'll get into the actual meat of the discussion here, and we'll define bias in a second. I'm just going to keep kind of introducing here. So, um, Anyway, so let's just keep that in mind as we talk about perceptual bias, some of the science of how we study bias and stuff like that. And we can start to identify, well, maybe in these steps of the research process, scientists themselves are biased, right? They and there's actually research on research that shows yes, research has been biased in the past. And by bias in the past, we can discuss what all that means. So I'm actually going to write a mental note to myself so I don't forget to discuss bias in research. Okay, so before we actually get into the bias thing, I do want to get a couple more things out of the way as kind of the introductory things that I usually do. So the other thing that's been keeping me busy that is relevant to our channel, to the streams, is so my wedding is right around the corner, and we've been planning it. So that's been consuming some of my time, some of my free time, and also I'm getting married out of the country of where I live right now. So that means I have to travel. So I'm gonna be gone for a little bit. So for the next I would say 2 weeks. Let me see. I leave next week. I can do a Taco Tuesday, so we'll have one more Taco Tuesday. But then I'm gonna miss 2 Science Fridays. So for 2 weeks, this channel will be dark. I'll be talking on Twitter maybe. And with that being said, let me pull up. Let me pull up. Oh, wrong thing. Let me pull up the something I want to just show the stream here. I'm gonna pull up my actual Twitch page, just because I want to show this every time, just so people are aware that this is a thing on my channel. So on my channel, I do have. I know you can't see right now. I'm pulling it over. On my channel, I do have this feed right here. This is there, so you don't even have to follow me on Twitter. But if you were wondering if there was going to be a Taco Tuesday or Science Friday, here I tweet about it. So I tweeted about today's Science Friday. Science Friday is on today, and the topic, I didn't have a topic in mind at the time, and so I just said it'll be random, and then we landed on perceptual bias for today. But I just want to let the channel know that I'll be basically messaging through here. And I do this every time too. I do these tweets out, and I do it on my channel. You don't have to follow me on Twitter. I'm not asking for follows on Twitter. You don't have to do that. You can just simply come to this page that you're watching right now and just see, like, oh, he's not streaming today. Oh, he's streaming today. That type of stuff. But for the most part, I stream every Tuesday and Friday, as we've all hopefully seen. And then the other thing I do want to say is, if you click this badge right here, join us on Discord, you do get an invite to the Discord. And the Discord is still being built. It's not this polished off, awesome. Oh, I didn't send this out. Oh, I didn't. Okay. So this is the Discord where I also send out some messages here, and people can interact, and you can ask for citations for some of the science we might talk about. You can ask certain things in science. So there's all these channels. A lot of this was built by people from the community, so that was really cool and really nice of them. And so, for example, like art and music channel, some people request, like, maybe other people want to share some stuff. So it's still being built. It's not the most flawless community, but it's being built, so it's really cool. I like that it's there. So that is also there on my channel, on that badge that says join us. You just click that badge and it invites you. All right. So again, I'm your host, Shark. I'm a 5th-year PhD student in social neuroscience. So basically, we're combining social psychology with neuroscientific methods. And when I say neuroscientific methods, we're really meaning trying to understand the physiology, like the physical brain, because psychology, you can oftentimes split this science into kind of brain versus mind, even though they're one and the same. Mind, you're really looking at like the brain in motion. So you can't scan somebody while they're doing a lot of things, socially speaking. So we go after cognitive methodology. So cognitive psychology can help us a lot to study the mind. And the brain, well, we're going to study the physical organ. And, it's illegal to bring participants, kill them, and take out their brains to study the cells. We can't do that. But right now, the technology allows us to do a lot of scanning, right? We can see inside people's brains and see activity in the brain and start to make some correlations between that activity in the brain and the behavior the person is exhibiting. And there's a reason why I purposely used the word correlation between the image of the brain and what they're doing. It's because this is still not causal data. And today we're not going to talk about causality. Maybe I should dedicate a Science Friday to causality. It relates to statistics, of course, but I don't want to. That talk might be a little dry. I don't know. If people are really interested in statistics, I just got done teaching a quarter of statistics, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm happy to talk about stats, but today's topic is bias. So we're not doing statistics. I'm gonna grab a quick drink of water. I prepped all these water cups because my younger brother, I saw him lurking in the chat there, and he makes me drink like crazy. So bias. What is bias? Before we start talking about any science, let's really think about, well, what's bias? Let's think about these concepts. Something that I find cool about social psychology that I think a lot of students, when you teach social psychology or when you take social psychology as a student, um, it's I think first of all, people have a very huge misconception of what psychology even is, and we're not going to talk about that right now. It's not when we're talking psychology, we're talking about it in the scientific field sense, not the applied psychology. So applied psychology is scientifically based, but this is what we're calling clinical psychology from our standpoint, and applied psychology. And these are the therapists, right? People who give therapy. And no, they don't interpret your dreams and buy into all this astrology. No, they follow scientific method, but they apply it, right? They apply the scientific theory that psychologists and other fields are researching and coming up with solutions and other things. And also clinical psychologists do their own research as well. So the psychology we're talking about is scientific based. So how do we know about cognitive biases? How do businesses know how to market things to you all? How do governments know how to run their platforms so they're more likable to voters? How do we know this? That's a science. And that science, a lot of it is oftentimes called social psychology. It's the science and understanding of how the individual functions in social contexts. So that is a fun science because we're all individuals. So we can all think of moments we've been in social situations and relate immediately to the social psychological theory. So that's something that's very cool about social psychology. So to talk about bias, well, bias is studied a lot in social psych. And I think we're going to begin first by, oh yeah, I wanted to mention, so because we're all humans, we relate to a lot of the concepts that are studied in social psychology. I wanted to wrap up that ring. I wanted to connect that dot right there. So bias, we can all think of someone who's biased. We can maybe think of times we've been biased. And every time we use the word bias, a lot of the times in current English context, it sounds very negative, bias. But the thing is, in science, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's a very neutral term. It can be like in certain contexts, it can, yes, very much be very negative. In other contexts, it can be very much positive. So before we dive into the science, we can all think about, when have we been biased? Do we know people who are biased? What does bias mean? And something I like to do on this channel, when we learn about something, or when we're going to dive into some topics, I like to show people what I'm Googling in the moment. That way you can see that, like, my search process follows like a certain pattern. I like that I'm not just making a lot of these things up off the top of my head. I mean, I do talk about a lot of science, but anyone can stop me at any moment, and I please encourage this. I really encourage this. If you hear something we're talking about, like, oh, is there like some research article about that, or can I see the research on that? I'm happy to stop and be like, yeah, let me show you the article, and I can hopefully be able to send it to you somehow, or at least show you how you can get the article. So I just want to give a heads up on that. So I like to show what I'm doing on Google. Let's go to Google. So I like to show what I'm doing on Google because it just shows you that, anyone in this channel has the same access as me. I'm not doing anything special. Obviously, if you're in a different country, you might get different search results than me. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is, provided your country isn't blocking certain pages, or I'm not being blocked from certain pages that your country doesn't, I don't know. Provided all of that is clear and anyone has access to the same information I'm about to access. So that's something I really like to promote my channel, that anything we do here is without cost. Including this channel itself. I'm never going to ask for people to give me money for anything. I'm going to try to keep it as free as possible. I know there's ads right now, but like, I don't have control over that. I don't like that. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm never going to ask for that type of stuff, because my goal here is to promote science in a good light, and I don't want to taint that with kind of greed behind it, or any sort of motivation there. This channel is not motivated by anything like that. It's motivated by wanting to share science and have some fun while doing it. So let's talk about bias. What does bias mean? I just typed in bias. Prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So here it sounds very negative. Well, at least to me. Maybe it didn't to you. And that reason why it might sound negative to me is because I have a bias, probably, right? I have a preference for something. So in science, a lot of times when we do talk about bias, a lot of times it's really treated as this neutral, more neutral term. This and when I say neutral, it just means it means you have a preference. And I'm going to give an example of a time where I think no one would be upset to be called biased. So when you go to ice cream store, or you let's just say, oh, if you don't like ice cream, then I guess, well, that's a bias, right? And we'll define in just a second there. But let's say you go to an ice cream store, and your favorite ice cream flavor is chocolate. And so you go there and you don't like vanilla. So you go there and they ask you which one do you want, chocolate or vanilla? This is the only two flavors they have, and you choose chocolate. And you go there the next week and you do chocolate. You go there the next week and you do chocolate. What you are exhibiting there, how you are behaving, is a biased behavior because you keep selecting one over the other based on some preference of yours. So you're prejudiced in favor of one thing, chocolate, against the other, vanilla. So therefore, you are biased. So this is why we can also think of ways that, well, we're all biased if we have preferences then. No, that's true. We are all biased. If you have a preference, you will have a bias. If you go about your life living it extremely random, then you'd be the most unbiased person, but also that would be kind of hard to do. I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't enjoy it as much. Maybe you do. Maybe someone can find a lot of enjoyment out of doing absolutely everything randomly. But if you're not doing absolutely everything randomly, then you're exhibiting a behavioral bias. So, how are biases formed? Woo-wee, and how is it studied? So now we can start getting into a little bit more in depth into what we actually want to do with bias, because some biases, well, they're not really worth our time to study. Like, oh yeah, we have a preference for certain what's it called, the ice cream flavors. Yeah, of course, we don't need a whole scientific team to establish that link, right? Like, if we have a preference for flavor, well, there's your clear bias, and the data shows it. And the data would just be, what flavor did you choose every single week? And the data would show that you chose chocolate every single week. Therefore, the data would support the notion that you have a chocolate bias. So the same kind of logic of how we would collect data, right, for ice cream bias, we can do in the lab, but for other things like maybe attitudes towards a particular social group, right? Right now, that's a huge hot topic in the US, at least, and actually in a lot of European countries too, and a lot of the world. I've traveled to other countries in South America, North America, in Asia, in Europe. I haven't touched Africa yet. I really want to go though. But I've traveled around, and like as a social psychologist, when you travel around, it's kind of cool to see your theories at work in generalities, because a lot of the times you actually learn about social psychology if you're in an American university. They always like to mention, they always need to mention, it's very important in science to say, hey, just so you know, we collected data in the US, so we are not saying this generalizes to the whole world. But it's very cool when you start to find the trends yourself. Now, I can't conclude with a causality statement that these theories that I've learned that were studied using US samples are generalizable, because I might have a perceptual bias as I was traveling, right, and I might not have good data. So anyway, whew. So it's very cool when you're traveling as a social psychologist to see this kind of happening around the world. So, and when I say this, I mean there seems a lot of countries seem to be having some form of a social issue, whether it's a class issue, race issue, sexual orientation issue. These are topics that are talked about amongst a lot of societies, not all of them, of course. So some societies talk about drastically different things, but in a lot of the Western world especially, these are seemingly hot topics, and we can study the bias behind them. So we can actually get behind, well, what's your attitude towards a particular social group, a particular race, ethnicity, religion, a group that behaves in certain ways, right? So there, I guess maybe we should take a little break and define what a group is, because groups are very essential to understanding this intergroup context of bias. So group. So if you just type in group, a number of people or things that are located close together or considered or classed together. So basically, that just means that you can have a social identity. Let's take another quick social identity theory. Let's pull up social identity theory. This is a very central one to social psychology as well. And this is just that notion that people can derive probably a majority. Actually, no, they say people do derive a majority of their self-esteem and pride from the groups they belong to. So let's take a second to think about that. So is this why maybe people, when they buy an expensive brand, like to show it off because now you belong to a more elite group and you want to just display that, hey, I'm part of this group. Not everyone's part of this group, because to define a group you have to have borders. If you don't have a border that distinguishes you from another group, or there's a distinction between you and another group, then what classifies you as a group? Then you're just a random assortment of humans. And so this can, all of this stuff that we're just talking about right now can actually be the conversation as to, oh, well, why is there hierarchies in society? Are they important to society? That type of stuff, because there's a lot of theory that kind of says, oh, it's important to keep organization and societal structures by maintaining these groups and doing all these things. But anyways, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about bias. And since we're talking about bias at the group level right now, social identity theory is one of these theories. Let's look at the Wikipedia article. I know I'm a grad student and I'm saying this. It's okay. It's okay to use Wikipedia. I'm a PhD student. It's okay to do it. We just don't cite it. This is not a citable source. And when I say cite it, is when we're talking like when we're trying to publish science, this is not valid data to us. But it's a good starting point to learn about something to then find the valid data. So I like to start with Wikipedia. And here's what I mean by then finding the valid data. So I've already studied social psychology, so I'm already familiar with social identity theory. And but let's just say I'm reading this, and it kind of tells you who are the principal researchers, or the key researchers, or the first people to really come across or to come up with social identity theory. And here you'll say, as originally formulated by social psychologists Henry Tajfel and John Turner. Oh, so those are going to be your principal researchers. Now, what I can do is go to Google Scholar. I'm just going to type in Scholar here, and I can type in what are their last names? Tajfel and Turner. Tajfel. Oop, it's already coming up. Social identity theory, but we want Tajfel and Turner. And then I can start reading the abstract of their paper. And here's your science. And now, so some of these things, here's the bad thing. I'm going to let you all know right now. Here's kind of one of the bad things about our current way of doing science in at least Western cultures, is that a lot of our knowledge, even the authors themselves, we lose ownership over our own science when you send it to certain publishers. Not even the author, not even the scientists themselves have ownership over their own articles that they can distribute for free. A lot of these are behind paywalls. One of the motivations for this channel is to share science and avoid paywalls. So I try to find ways to get you all connected with science if you want to be connected with science. If you're just happy listening to what we're talking about like this at this level, then have at it. Enjoy. But if you want to go deeper, if you want these articles, join the Discord, connect with me, and let's find a way to share this science, because these are behind paywalls. But you can still have access to abstracts. Now, what's an abstract? Maybe you're unfamiliar with that term. An abstract is basically a quick summary of an entire scientific article. That way you can read it and be familiar with the whole article, and then you can read all the details of the article. So the abstract won't give you a really good sense of what the science is saying, but it'll give you like a very rough idea. And so here, this would just tell you the abstract is like, okay, what is a social identity theory and based on what? And so, but here's the citation, and within there we could find the actual evidence and the actual science that was done. And this is, I just did it by going to Wikipedia first. So Wikipedia is not evil. You might have heard this in high school or college. It's not evil. It's not the worst. I actually really like it. It's a free source. That's already, to me, such a noble, like, I don't want to sound like pandering or anything, but to me it's a very noble cause, because me as a scientist, one of my personal beliefs is I want knowledge to be accessible to absolutely everybody, because knowledge is power. And the people with knowledge know that knowledge is power, because you know from history, whenever there's knowledge consolidated in one spot, you have power over those who are not knowledgeable of certain things. And so knowledge is power, and I do think that if everyone has access to it and is able to critically think and use their knowledge and use their logic and that type of stuff, that you can drastically improve your life. So one of my goals here is to try to, make science more accessible, this kind of thing. So on that same note, Wikipedia is kind of, doing the same thing. They're like, we want to share knowledge and we don't want it to be locked behind paywalls or anything like that. So that's why I really like Wikipedia for that reason. Now, the problem is it can be tainted by people who are bad. just like science can. And so sometimes we run into some bad things in Wikipedia, like false information. But this is where I like Wikipedia because I like to see, okay, are things actually cited? Because if there are no citations at the bottom of the article, it's probably most likely an opinion piece. But the moment I start seeing citations and I'm reading, oh, British Journal of Social Psychology, like I'm reading that they're actually published in real places that do science. Even though I'm not familiar with the British Journal of Social Psychology, we can start cross-referencing across many references. We can see, okay, how many other journals are publishing that aren't them? Because if it's all British Journal of Social Psychology, then again, it might be one opinionated article that's just backed by the same institute. But if I see a British one, an American one, like a German one, or something like that, all these publications looking at the same thing, and they're all agreeing with the science, but they're independent universities, then you have more confidence that what you're looking at is pretty valid and is backed by pretty good evidence. So social identity theory is one of those theories that has been studied for a long time now. Well, long time is relative. Social psychology as a science is really young, relatively speaking. Whereas physics and chemistry are thousands of years old, social psychology is about 100 years old. Like barely that. And social psychology as the formal science is probably like 30 or 40 years old. And neuroscience as the current science couldn't be what it is until the advent of a lot of new technology, which means just in the 90s this was being born, like neuroscience. So just to give you all like an idea of how new a lot of this science is and why sometimes it's wrong, and this is where people will judge science, like, oh, science is wrong, so I'm not going to believe in it. Well, that's the way we learn. We learn from errors. Like that's how science works. We do trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, and actually error shows us the ways not to do things. Because if we got it right 100, if we got it right by chance every time, we would never learn anything. And then when we do hit failure, we wouldn't know why. But by getting failure over and over again and then success, we see, oh, these are all the wrong ways to do it. Now we know the right way to do it, and we're 100%, and we're not 100%, but we're very sure that this is the right way. So sciences can be wrong, just like physics was wrong, you know, a lot of the times when the physicists back in the way heyday thought, you know, the Earth was the center of the universe, and then we had paradigm shift. Oh no, it's the sun. Oh no, it's not the sun. Actually, the sun is also revolving around some greater object. And so maybe our current knowledge of our universe will change again with better technology and more understanding. Anyways, to stop the digression here, I'm just trying to say that actually I don't even know what I was trying to really say there, but social identity theory is one of those that has been studied for. Oh yeah, I got into it because it's not that old, but it's from the 70s and 80s, so it's been getting a lot of support in science. So it's a pretty good theory to learn about. So let's go back to bias. So I brought up social identity theory because we're talking about groups, just to give you an idea of where your biases can be, right? It doesn't have to be. When I say groups and when I say we're biased against certain people, I think some people might jump to racism immediately. No, you can be like, oh, let's just say I'm a fan of some soccer team and we have a rival. Naturally, every team has rivals. Well, then I'm going to have a bias. I'm probably going to find reasons to get along with people who like my team and find reasons to not get along with people who don't like my team. Even though we probably could share 99% of other things in common, I'm probably going to try to highlight the 1% things we don't have in common in this context on purpose because they support my opposing team. That's a bias. That's a group bias, right? And so we can think about bias in all of these ways, not just the ice cream flavor choice or racism, for example, but you can think about like, oh yeah, I support this team, my friend doesn't, or but we still get along. So look, I can overcome these perceptual biases and all that type of stuff. Or oh, I don't get along with this group of people. Maybe I should give them a chance because maybe I am highlighting the negatives and really downplaying the positives in a biased manner on purpose. Thank you so much. Thanks for the follow, UD Pine. Hey, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but thank you so much. Thanks for the follow. I hope you're having a great Friday and hope this is interesting. So the next topic I do want to talk about is how can we form a bias and like where is it forming from? And to talk about this formation of a bias, I'm going to bring up another theory. This theory we've talked about in this channel a lot of times, and I think a lot of people will probably hear me say this a lot. I do like to put this out on the internet as much as I can. I just want to make people as aware of this concept. It's called naive realism. So I apologize to people who've probably heard this 5 or 6 times by now, but maybe it's a good thing you're hearing this many times just to kind of keep it, you know, there and re-engage with this. But naive realism. Let me take a sip of water, and thanks again for the follow. I appreciate it. I'm gonna take a sip of water though, really quick. Okay. So naive realism. So I'm going to turn to this one to start to explain, to start to have this conversation about, well, how our bias is formed. And before we begin that conversation, I do want to mention to anyone in the chat, you're welcome to chime in. You're welcome to ask questions, put comments. You can always divert the conversation to whatever you want. That's the purpose of the live stream. Otherwise, I could just podcast this. But I do like to interact with viewers, if you so please. If you just like listening, then continue enjoying, I guess. All the more power to you. But anyone is welcome to chime in with any ideas, thoughts, questions, anything. I'm happy. If you don't agree with things that are being said here, if you don't like, if you want to see the science, or maybe you have opposing science, I'm happy to hear it. I'm always happy to look at data. Obviously, if people send me, I've gotten this in like not on the stream, but like in other online platforms where people will disagree with some of the articles I'll have posted, and they'll send me their article, and I'll read it, and it's just it's a blog, and I'm like, I'm sorry, like we can't, like, yeah, that's an opinionated piece. That's so you got one data point, because a blog is one data point, right? One human's opinion. So that's one data point, but the science that I'm basing a lot of what I say on is based on thousands and thousands of data points. Because this is what I mean by this has been supported by a lot of evidence. Is it's not just one research team that has done and worked on these theories. Other research teams have also come in and used it and be like, all right, let's see if it's still holding true. Now, that's not true for absolutely every single theory. Actually, some of the theories in social psychology now are being debunked because no one ever retested them. They retried and be like, I don't know how they found it, but now using our way better statistics, because statistics have gotten way better since the 60s as well. Like statistics, math, not math, but the statistics the models that we use have gotten better thanks to computing. Computers have really helped the statistics come along to allow us to do very elegant designs for or very elegant statistical models to help us compute very complicated models. So, but what I am trying to say is that, yeah, I have gotten those people, if it's an opinionated piece, well, I'm only going to give it the weight of n equals 1. If you are familiar with statistics at all, you might know that n equals 1 is a horrible sample size. You cannot generalize with an n equals 1. N is just the symbol for sample size. And so you cannot generalize using n equals 1, but people really like to, or if they give me anecdotal evidence, we can use anecdotal evidence here and there. And anecdotal evidence, what this means is it's just from your personal life experience. Oh, I met people that are this way. I've met people of this group that behave this way. Therefore, they all must be that way, right? You're like, well, your n, your sample size, first of all, is going to be based on memory, and memory is extremely biased. That's something we can get into today. Memory's already biased. The mind tends to overestimate certain things, underestimate other things. It tends to do this, and we have data that shows that the mind tends to do this. But two, there's no way you could have met absolutely. Let's just say you're generalizing about a certain race. You're telling me that you met absolutely everyone from that race, and now you're able to generalize a specific behavior about them? Or maybe you've met 2, 3 people, and that's what you're basing your generalizations on. If that's the case, then I'm going to treat your opinion with an n equals 3, which still statistics says that's horrible. You can't generalize with an n equals 3. You would need way more data to generalize. So you can have your opinions, sure, and all that, but if we want to talk science, I'm going to need some more evidence. So I just want to mention that, yeah, I'm happy to read things people send me, but I'm only going to treat it with the gravity. If you're trying to disprove some of the science I'm showing here, and you have no evidence, that's the gravity I'm going to treat it with. But that hasn't happened yet, and I don't really anticipate that happening. But anyway, let's get back to naive realism. So why am I talking about naive realism? So we're talking about bias formation. How do you form a bias? Right? So one way is through repetition, and you find through experience, right? Maybe you're tasting all these different ice creams and you found, wow, I get the most kind of pleasurable sensation out of my mouth and my overall body and my overall experience. So you're paying attention to your arousal levels and your physiological response to the chocolate stimulus. So this is one way of, for example, just developing a flavor bias. So you're going through all these flavors, and some of them don't elicit such a great response from you. Other ones elicit a great response, and that response you might pay attention to and keep that in your memory and be like, oh, last time I had a really positive experience with this flavor and not so much with this one. I'm going to go with the other flavor that gave me that positive experience. There's your bias forming, and if we keep doing it, you're going to strengthen that bias. Just like if you keep working out your muscles, you're going to strengthen out the muscles. Your biases kind of function in a very similar way. And you can actually start to form habits out of these biases. And these are called, and some of these mental habits, let's just take a quick pause because this is a cool thing. Some of these mental habits or biases are called shortcuts, and they're called heuristics in social psychology. This is enabling, wait, what? No, it's a mental shortcut. A heuristic process or method. I want to see where it is. Where are you? Let's do social psychology. This isn't the exact social psychology, exact definition we're looking for. Simple decision-making strategies that guide people's behavior and decisions in the social environment when time, information, or cognitive resources are scarce. So mental shortcuts. This is, for example, what do I mean by this? A stereotype. Stereotypes are mental shortcuts. It's a quick generalization about a social group, and a lot of those things are usually based on very, very little evidence. If not, it's completely false. I'm gonna sorry about this one, but I just want to show an example of a false stereotype because I have seen this on the internet a lot that, well, stereotypes are always based on some truth. No, that's actually false. Some stereotypes are based on absolute lies. Let's look at the watermelon stereotype. This one's a great one to bring up just to show where is Wikipedia on this one. Wikipedia is gonna be our friend here again. There you are. So if we read a little bit about this, you'd see that, where is it? Is a stereotype, the first published character rebelling, okay, is believed to appear, blah, blah, blah. Where are you? Where's the usage of it? I'm looking for the usage of it. Oh, I guess not. Huh. Because the reason I learned this is a stereotype was as people were gaining their freedom, when the slaves were freed, as they were gaining their freedom, they were starting to become farmers, try to get some money for themselves so they could survive. And to keep them down, you just stigmatized watermelon, and you made watermelon look really bad. So that way the market wouldn't want to buy the watermelon, and that would keep watermelon vendors very poor. And I'm looking at where it is. Anyway, I guess we're gonna have to. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We can talk about this later, I guess. That's really weird. When I do it on my phone, when I go to the mobile version of this, it has a little section, and I have a screenshot of it too. It has a little section on the myth of it. Anyways, there's a long history about this. We're not here to talk about stereotypes. I just wanted to mention heuristics, and a stereotype is a form of a heuristic, or one type of heuristic that we have. Let's get back to naive realism and bias formation. Sorry for that little deviation. I just wanted to make that aware that, yeah, some stereotypes are not based on sort of evidence. And then maybe you have something called the self-fulfilling prophecy that when you say something enough and then people start to believe it, then it becomes true. But like the stereotype was first and then you kept repeating it and then it became true. That can happen too. That's called the self-fulfilling prophecy. So bias. Naive realism is something I like to bring up when we talk about bias. So naive realism is the human tendency to believe what we see, that we see the world around us objectively, and that people who disagree with us must be uninformed, irrational, or biased. So I bring this up because when we think about, well, how are we interacting with our worlds? Well, how are you doing this? You're using vision. If you know, that's one primary sense that you have is your vision. You're using your ears to hear people. You're using your mouth to talk with others, to interact with others, to send signals to others. You're using your body to navigate your world, and your body has sensors has thermoreceptors, right? It has pressure receptors and has pain receptors. So you have this ability to interact with your environment. And if a lot of the interaction you're doing it visually, for example, like you're getting a lot of your data to make assumptions or to behave a certain way through vision, the notion here with naive realism is, well, how could I not be seeing an objective world if the light itself is light that comes to my eyes? That's not lying to me. It's not like someone's getting in the middle and performing some magic to change the light waves hitting my eyes. So So therefore, what I experience in my life is objective because it's not like I'm manipulating the nature around me to be like what I want. So anyone that doesn't see it the way I do is therefore biased, uninformed, or irrational. They have to be a little bit crazy because we're living the same reality. We're living the same world with the same physical laws. This is kind of the basis of naive realism. And so if this is the case, if people are kind of going around the world thinking this is the case, well then you can start saying, okay, well, what happens when we encounter this image here? Where's the 6 and 9 image? Where are you? Where are you? Here it is. This is the image that I wanted to just bring up. Because what happens when you have this situation, right? So we're talking about naive realism. We're saying, okay, well, if what I see is objective because I'm not distorting the laws of physics, then what happens if my perception is biased? So meaning every time I encounter this shape, I always encounter it from this side on this side, then I'm always going to say 6. I have a perceptual bias now because I'm not gathering the data in my brain. I'm not giving it data that can see this 6 from a different angle, maybe from the bottom, maybe from the sides, maybe from this guy's angle. So when this guy comes along and he sees the 9, he says, well, that's clearly a 9. But when this guy comes in, he says, no, that's clearly a 6. And they're going to disagree because they both feel like they're seeing something objective and real. Therefore, the other person must be biased, uninformed, or irrational. So this is naive realism. Let's zoom in a little bit right there. So hopefully this is starting to give us an idea, well, of how our biases are formed, right? If we think there's this other meme that is used a lot in these social psych classes, and I see it get thrown around. I see it get thrown around in social media all the time. It's this Homer Simpson meme, and we like to show it for naive realism. This just kind of exemplifies. This gives you like a joke, a humor, little comic or little frame of naive realism, right? Where people tend to have this belief. Everyone is stupid except me. Another belief, another bias that people can exhibit that relates to naive realism is the better than average effect, right? Better than average effect. So this is the tendency for people to perceive their abilities, attributes, and personality traits as superior compared to the average peer. The problem with that perceptual bias is, have you actually scientifically, like validly gauged yourself against the group you think you're better than? So if you're like, oh, I'm better than, I'm like of the best students out there, have you gone around the world and collected the data comparing yourself to all the students in the world? Or are you just comparing yourself to the people in your near proximity that you have access to, that your brain has been able to actually go out, interact with, and get that data on? Because if it's just those around you, then it's not a valid statement. Then you're exhibiting a perceptual bias because you don't have access to all the data. You only have access to your perception of the data. So other people might disagree with you. Another thing that people have probably talked about is the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology is a cognitive bias. Look at that, the word bias, whoop, is a cognitive bias whereby people with limited knowledge or competence in a given intellectual or social domain greatly overestimate their knowledge or competence in that domain relative to objective criteria or to the performance of their peers or of people in general. So let's look at this graph to kind of unpack what that means. I think this one, yeah. Oh, actually, like this one's funny. This one's funny because I think if you've already gone through college or you've gone through something quite hard that required a lot of time out of you and energy and work, you might have exhibited this curve. So as people are engaging with new material, they're going to maybe get this better than average effect and this naive realism, right? That's going to feed into their confidence because people tend to feel, they tend to feel they're better. There's also the egocentric bias. Egocentric bias is the tendency to rely too heavily on one's own perspective and or have a higher opinion of oneself than reality. So let's recap real quick. Let's recap all these biases that I've just started listing. Let's recap them. Let's recap them really quick. So we got egocentric bias. I'm going to put this on a notepad here. We got naive realism. I'm putting on a notepad over here just so we can have it written down somewhere. So we got egocentric bias, naive realism, better than average effect, and we have the Dunning-Kruger effect. So we have four. We've already briefly talked about them. We have these four biases we can keep in mind to kind of go over this graph of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So people are coming into these situations. They're saying, you know, probably the average person's going to struggle. I might not be the best. I know that because people aren't going to exaggerate all the time. You can't lie to yourself and others 24/7. So, you know, it'd be a little bit too much if you're like, I'm the best right off the bat. People would kind of be like a little crazy. But you sound more sane coming in saying like, yeah, I'm not going to be the worst. I'm not going to be the best either, but I'm not going to be the worst. I'll probably be above average. The problem with that is that by definition, not everyone can be above average, right? By definition. So that's where the bias starts, right? This is where your perceptual bias is beginning, is your belief that you're better than average. And then you have the egocentric bias. This is you tend to see yourself in a favorable way. So you might start attributing things to you that might make you believe you're going to be good at this. I'm a smart person. I'm quick. I'm a fast learner. I'm a hard worker. I'm more hardworking than these people. I'm smarter than these people. You might start feeling like you have this, with this egocentric bias, you're feeding into your better than average effect type thing. And so as you start doing things and you start to catch on, oh, this is how it works, your brain is starting to tell you, you're confirming through very limited data, super limited data, that yeah, this is easy, you did it, you're great. But the thing is, you haven't actually hit the hard parts yet. You just scratched the surface. And when you actually break through that surface, so grad school was that for me, right? In college, I was like, man, I'm learning so much and I'm understanding so much of the world, wow. And then you actually start to dig really deep into the knowledge, like, whoa, my God, there's so much more here than, oh, and it's just blowing your mind. And then you start to feel really stupid. And that's why it's called the Valley of Despair. So here's called the peak amount stupid, because this is where people start to close themselves off from new information because they believe they know it all. They go, I already know everything. Why do I need to hear from you if I know more than you? But you barely scratched the surface. You don't have all the data. You have this perceptual bias, and you might be being blinded by the egocentric bias, the better than average effect, and your naive realism. And so once you actually do break through that surface, right, you hit this valley of despair. Like, there's so much to learn. You start to realize, I don't even know what I don't know. That's these people here in Valley of Despair. They go, I don't even know what I don't know. There's so much here, and I don't know. And the reason why I know that when people are here, that there's no way they can know everything is because humanity doesn't know everything. Not one person knows absolutely everything. That's why science still exists. That's the purpose of science. We're still trying to find stuff out. So if someone claims they know absolutely everything about a certain topic, I'm going to go, no, you don't. You might, if I'm talking to someone that has like multiple doctorates and all these publications on that topic, like, you might be the person with the most knowledge about that topic, but you don't know everything about it. And I think that person would probably agree with me. They'd be like, no, yeah, no, for sure. If you're doing an extensive amount of work in a certain topic, you start to realize like, oh my God, there's so much work there. There's a lot of work. And to be able to understand something 100% right now with our current technology and understanding in science, we can't even do that statistically speaking. The best we can say is we're 99.99999% sure of this, but we'll never say 100% in science. And so anyway, so then people might fall into this valley of despair. That's when you've broken through that surface. You're like, oh my God, I don't even know what I don't know. Holy cow. And then as you practice more with it and start to really understand, you start to gain mastery. That mastery actually starts to feel fun, because now that you do understand it and you understand why it doesn't work the way it doesn't and why it works the way it works, you can play with it however you want. This is what I like to tell people in organic chemistry when they're taking organic chemistry. That was my favorite classes in undergrad. At the beginning, it was really hard. And yeah, you might get some homework problems right, and you might be here, but then you realize, wow, OChem is there's a lot to it. There's a lot. And so you dip down to here. But then when you start to really understand OChem, and you start to understand the principles of OChem and the patterns of OChem, then you go, oh, so these pieces all fit like this, and they can't fit like this, and they can't do this, and the electrons cannot move like this, but they can like this. That's essentially like learning exactly how your Legos work. And now you can build a fort or a car with the same Lego set, because you know how your blocks work now. You have the ability to do all of this cool new creative stuff because you've mastered that topic. I got a bot trying to send best followers, primes, viewers. Yeah, let's trash that. I don't know what that is. Bye, bot. I'm sorry, but I don't know what that is. Okay, so anyway. So as we play with our Legos more and we understand, whoa, I can build a castle, I can build a ship, I can build this, we start to engage in this. My competence is going up. As my competence goes up, I get towards mastery or guru, right? Gurus are people that are really super masters. Like they're like the leaders of knowledge. And so this is where you can start to see people's egos be calm, where you see their self-esteem shoot up, this plateau stability or sustainability. This is where people have calm and they'll start to be like, yeah, I don't know everything, but I know a lot of stuff. And when you talk to these people, people have published for decades and decades. You can tell them, hey, you don't know everything, and they'll be like, yeah, I don't know everything, but I for sure know way more than you. And that's also what gives them confidence. So you'll talk to some scientists, they might have that attitude. Sometimes they don't mean it. Some of the scientists are that way. They're jerks. I'm gonna tell you right now. It's get owner bud. uh, some of the scientists are going to throw their egos around. Some of them deserve it. Their egos are big because they deserve it. Other scientists do not deserve it. And I think if you've been out in the real world, you probably have met people who, like, yeah, they worked hard and they're proud of their work. And so they're going to be talking about their stuff and they're proud and they might be throwing their ego around. You're like, okay, yeah, but they at least deserve it. And other people, you might be like, man, they're talking a big game, but they don't deserve that. Like, they are just talking big game, but they're not that great. Um, yeah, so those are probably people over here in Peak Amount Stupid, and these people really want to be over here, but you have to put in the work, and they haven't put in the work yet, and so you have to be here. If you've done any, you can probably find examples of your life of this graph, right? I know people in this chat. I know someone in particular. They went through a really hard process of getting a black belt, right? And then I'm sure if you talk to people who are just starting, they go, "Oh, it's an or maybe they haven't even touched karate, right? They go, "It's so easy. All you have to do is just chop wood, and then you get your black belt," because that's all they think, because that's all they see in movies. They don't know all the work you actually have to put in. They don't know this whole portion of everything you have to put in to become a master of karate, to get your black belt, right? Your black belt is, to me, is at least that, like, yeah, you put in a lot of work and effort, and this is your reward. Like, this is a symbol of all that work and effort. And I think that's also why some people that are over here might get upset with these people, because you don't want to get your symbol degraded. Like, to me, the PhD is the symbol that you went through all of this. It is tough, and you did it, and here's your symbol of that. So people with fake PhDs are cheating in that sense. They're going to skip this. But I'm not here to castigate people. I'm not here to frown upon people. We're here to just talk about the science itself. But so you can relate. Maybe you're a captain of a team. Maybe you're a captain of a debate team. Maybe you've put in, but anywhere you've put in a lot of work and a lot of time went into that as well over time, because a lot of gaining competence. The way our brain works is you can't become a master overnight. That's just not the way our brain works. I don't. This whole Tony Stark, I learned theoretical physics overnight. You can't. The brain can't function like this. It's not a computer. It can't save information the way computers can. There are very rare instances that some people have these really amazing brains, but you can't master something overnight, because mastery requires time, because it requires trial and error. It requires so much error to become a master of something. It's error. It's through error. In fact, there's even that saying, the master has failed way more times than the beginner has even attempted. And it's through all those failures that you become a mastery. And to fail over and over again requires time. So that's also, I want to give it a positive spin. Give yourselves time if you're working on stuff. If you're not getting stuff and you feel you're in this valley of despair, time is what it takes. I'm saying that as a grad student. I failed a lot to get where I am at right now. I failed so much to get where I'm at. I failed classes. I have gotten rejected from schools. I've gotten rejected from programs. I've gotten rejected from scholarship opportunities, but I've also been accepted into things, right? All it takes is one, too. It just takes one acceptance. I got into grad school. I'm here. So I wanted to give a positive spin there. If you do find yourself in the valley of despair, just remember, try and try again. That's the way the brain works. The brain learns through trial and trial and trial, through repetition. This is how the brain is kind of working. What's up? Are you a grad? Yes, I'm a grad nerd. Welcome. If you're a grad, welcome, fellow grad. Hopefully you can share. If you're a grad in this science, hopefully you can share some of your stuff. Yeah. Having a hard, yeah, exactly. Just keep hitting that brick wall. You're gonna break through. You're gonna get to that plateau of sustainability. So anyway, I think I've spent a lot of time on this Dunning-Kruger effect. We were talking about. Oh, we were talking about. We can. Where's my notepad? There we go. We were talking about these guys here. We brought in all these terms here that related to how can someone get to this point of peak amount stupid. So yeah. So if anyone has gone through these processes, you might be familiar. You might be able to identify some people that are still here. Some people have made it to over here. Making it over here is quite tough and takes time. I just want to end with that. Okay. Now, we're at a crux in this talk right now of bias. We're talking about perceptual bias, right? So we can discuss. Actually, I think there's a lag in the chat. I just want to see. Graph, if you want, what are you doing? You're a grad student, right? What are you doing, or what do you study? I don't want to put you on the spot though. I can just keep chatting if everyone's here just to listen. I'm happy to keep chatting. Loot vest. Theoretical computer. Holy cow. Is okay. I don't know much about that field. I know about computer science, but theoretical. So it's like, from my knowledge of like theoretical physics versus physics, right? Theoretical physics, you're really doing the stuff. No, I care if that makes you feel better. I'm really happy there's people that like you that are doing these things because, I mean, I really wish I could be okay, technically I'm being trained, not like you probably, but technically I'm being trained as a computer scientist because neuroscience, if you're not familiar with some computing language, you're gonna have problems in neuroscience because at this point with technology to interface with like our machines, it's really advantageous to know some programming language. That doesn't make us computer scientists. That just means we're being trained a little bit like computer scientists. So I'm glad people are being fully trained as computer scientists to keep making our software and our technology a lot better. And it's like things are getting so much better in our field in neuroscience thanks to computer scientists and computer engineering and all of them. Our experiments are getting more elegant, they're getting better, we're able to get better data and all that type of stuff. The imposter syndrome. Okay, yeah. So the imposter syndrome. Let's go back to the Dunning-Kruger. So the imposter syndrome, for people who might be unfamiliar on this channel about what the imposter syndrome is, let's just Google it really quick. Imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome, again, I like to Google everything in front of the chat so that way you guys can see I'm not just making things up. You can Google this too. Some of the things I will be pulling from my memory, of course. But anyway, imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. It disproportionately affects high-achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. So this is the imposter syndrome. It's really focused on this feeling right here, is doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. So that's what it means. And in graduate school, at least in my graduate school, my program, the first years, we all get warned. Like, by the way, everyone goes through imposter syndrome. Everyone feels it. They try to normalize it that way you don't feel as bad, because it doesn't feel the best to have this imposter syndrome feeling. So. All right, so where is the imposter syndrome at home and when does it stop? When does it stop? I don't know yet. I haven't experienced it myself. I still get imposter syndrome. I started feeling a little bit less impostery. I'm a fifth year now. I don't know what year you are in grad school, but I'm like at the tail end. And so now, like, I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know, like, entirely, and I don't think I ever will, especially because my interests span physics, chemistry, biology, and psychology. I like all four of those topics, and I can't see my life without any one of those four sciences. So because I like so much, I'm unfortunately becoming a jack of all trades, master of none. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna read this out loud for. I don't have text to speech yet. I'm very sorry for the channel, but so anyways, here's neuroscience neat. No, no, look, I'm way far away. Most of my grad life consists with Greek letters. Yeah, I can imagine, and like 7 different flavors of arrows. I don't know what those arrows are, but I'm sure it's a lot of fun. I'm closer to mathematicians and philosophers. Yeah. Are you by any chance German? Just by any chance. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you are, just because of the name, I don't know though. I might be absolutely wrong. But yeah, no, I know a lot of, at least from my experience of computing, of like having to deal with programming languages, I actually had to, well, the way we were trained is we actually had to learn, oh my gosh, matrix algebra before we started really diving into like R. We use R. for our like programming language for statistics. We use R, but we also use Python to design our experiments and run our experiments on computers. We use Python. Um, Now I know you guys probably use something way harder or something way different, or maybe you use Python. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I just scratched the surface of kind of computing science and that type of stuff because of neuroscience. Neuroscience kind of needs it. But I don't, and the most math, I do have to deal a lot with Greek letters as well because our statistical models demand it. Like you're using your alphas, your betas. But other than that, I mean, statistics have the Greek letters too. But I'm probably not doing a lot of models like you are, though. So, as I let the stream catch up to kind of fill in this space, the imposter syndrome and the graph. So I think it probably starts to disappear. Your imposter syndrome probably, and I don't even think it fully disappears ever. I haven't met, at least from my professors in my department, I still haven't met someone that says they don't have like imposter syndrome. Okay, so near Swiss. Oh, cool. Okay. Very, very cool. Welcome. That's really cool. I lived in Berlin so I can't speak Swiss German at all. I had a week of Swiss German. I studied High German because I lived in Berlin. Um, Und ich habe Deutsch gelernt und es war ganz gut. Ich liebe Deutsch. Es ist super toll. Ich finde es super toll und ich finde es sehr schön auch. So anyway, yeah, I learned German in Berlin, and we had a week of Swiss German, and man, that blew my mind. I was like, holy cow, is it still the same language? At least what we were presented like. We like in German they would call it Schweizerdeutsch, but then in Swiss German they would say Schweizerdeutsch or something like that. Like Schweizerdeutsch. That's the way that our teacher was saying. It's like, yeah, ja, es ist auf Deutsch, Hochdeutsch, es ist Schweizerdeutsch und auf Schweizerdeutsch, Schweizerdeutsch, auf Schweizerdeutsch ist Schweizerdeutsch or something like that. Yeah, imposter syndrome is not fun. But we can sometimes remind ourselves of imposter syndrome, and sometimes that gives you a little bit more confidence, and it'll give you a little bit of a confidence boost, hopefully. Is Swiss German even still German? Trick question. We don't even have a grammar. I had literally a week. Yeah. Switzerland. I've been there before. I gotta know more of the country though. I've only been, so I guess I probably shouldn't say I've been to Switzerland because I've only been to Geneva, and I really feel like that's not going to Switzerland. Um, like I was on the border, right, and I was mainly on the French side of things around that area. It felt like it, yeah. It felt like my German teacher because we were sitting there like, we're struggling already to understand High German and like speak it, and now you're throwing this dialect at us. But I think it was good to know about that. I like that they did that because it makes you aware that hey, although it's called German, just be aware that if you do go to those regions, you're not going to understand. So that was at least nice from the teachers. That's cool. Yeah. So I understand in Europe the PhD programs work. So for anyone else in this channel that might not follow here, in the US, it is normal that you do your master's first and then do your PhD, but there are programs, maybe Europe has them too now, I'm not sure. I did apply to actually European grad schools as well, and I was applying to master's programs over there, but in the US, you are able to apply straight to PhD from your bachelor's degree. You can go straight to PhD, but what that means is your first 2 years of your graduate program or your first 2 to 3 years are still masters, and you still get your master's degree. So I did that. I did 2 bachelor's degrees. I got one in biology and one in psychology. And then I applied to graduate schools. I actually applied from Germany. I was applying over there when I lived there. And then I applied to some German ones and I applied to some American ones. Didn't get accepted the first round to the schools I wanted. I applied again, got accepted to the one I wanted this time around. And my first 2 to 3 years, my first 2.5 years was master's. So I have my master's now, and now I'm at the end of my PhD. I do. I have a fascination with languages. This is not part of my research at all. I do have a fascination with languages. It's just a personal thing. So I grew up speaking Spanish and English. Those are the two native ones to me. I moved to Germany, started learning German. I got to B2 in German, and then I met a girl in Berlin that was also taking German. So she's not German, and now we're married. I met her. She's from Slovakia, And so I'm trying to learn her language now. So having learned German and now I'm learning Slovak has made me even more in tune with like kind of grammar structures and that type of stuff. So, but I didn't know. So let me read this out. So the grammatically, we actually don't have certain tenses that High German doesn't. Really? Okay. There's actually an excellent video on Swiss German and English on YouTube. I'm gonna write this down. Hold up. Hold up. Hold up. Lang focus. I'm gonna look this up. Lang focus. I really like seeing something that I really like doing when I've been learning these languages is seeing the parallels across all these languages. Like in Slovak and Spanish, it's so weird how so many words are pronounced and spelled exactly the same way, but they have different meanings. I like thinking of how false friends came about. Like the false friend between German and English, for example, is the word gift. In English, it's a positive thing. In German, that means poison. So like you don't want to gift someone, gift. Um, you don't do past imperfect. Interesting. Whoa. I don't know anything about Swiss German. And then, honestly, I think everyone that got over a certain bump in that skill graph is going to suffer. Yeah, 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 exactly. Like imposter syndrome. I have professors that have gotten lifetime achievement awards now. There's actually a Nobel laureate at my campus. There's one of the guys that came up with the procedure split braining. So you have something called a corpus callosum in your brain. This is I mean, I like this conversation. I was going to say it's a weird tangent, but it's not really a super tangent. Brain anatomy. We need a different. There we go. Can we see it from here? We can't really see it from here, but we'll. I'm gonna open this up. So I know it's a really blurry picture. It doesn't really matter that much. But in between your brain, you have something called the corpus callosum. It's like a bridge or like a big thick cable that connects your two brains. So that way they can communicate to each other. The two hemispheres can communicate to each other via the corpus callosum. And the guy came up with a surgery to split it, to actually cut that in half, and that drastically helped people with epilepsy. So people that kind of get these shakes because their neurons are overfiring. So this helped contain the kind of electrical storms of the brain. It helped contain it, and so it was huge. And this allowed for a lot of studies of understanding behavior. So much came from it. This guy got a lot of rewards and all that stuff. He's on my campus, and then there's another researcher. She's done a lot in social psychology who just got a lot of rewards as well. And I bring these people up because even these people still mention they can get stressed from time to time, even though they are seen as the gurus in their topics, that they are the leading experts on these topics. They themselves still say they will feel stressed to talk in front of some people. They will still feel imposter syndrome from time to time. Maybe not as frequent or as strong as maybe a graduate student or all of us that are still trying to learn certain things. Maybe not as strong, but they still experience it. And so I don't know how to answer like when does it go away. But just I at least take comfort in that it's a human experience that everyone goes through when you try to learn something and you try to get better at stuff. So that makes me feel better that even Einstein had to go through it, you know. And we also there's a lot I can say on our perceptions of like people like Einstein. But anyway, let me read the comments. Let me catch up here. So look look what screwed me over is murder versus murder in English. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Murder is murder in German. Okay. Murder. There's just oh yeah. English the murderer. Yeah, because murder is the noun. Murderer would be the adjective of the person. Yeah, the lobotomy would be your prefrontal cortex, where you just go poof with a nail right through here. The corpus callosum is in the center, really deep in there, because these surgeries took place in like the 40s or 50s. So technology wasn't that great, and to be able to perform this surgery without killing somebody was pretty immense. Um, and that type of surgery allowed for a lot of like questions, like, oh, so we don't die if the brain gets disconnected that way, because some people thought you would. Like, how could your two hemispheres still be functioning like this if they're cut? Like, I thought they would die, but you don't die. It goes, oh wow, you're still processing information in a lot of the same ways as people who have the corpus callosum intact. You're still processing information the same way. But then they started to notice that some things like memory consolidation wasn't working as well, sleep wasn't working as well, and I don't actually remember a lot of the other studies. This isn't my forte. This isn't my field of interest, so I don't know too much about that literature. But I just know that a lot of science came from that that type of study. And the only reason I brought up that guy is because he's a super famous guy, and you chat with him, he's chill, and he'll say, he'll get stressed from time to time. So we just got to make it. We got to make it to this plateau of sustainability. And on our way there, what can help us sometimes is being aware of our biases, right? Because when you're also aware of your biases, something that I also, one reason I like to bring up biases from time a lot actually, is when you're aware of your biases, then you can be aware of how to correct for them and make more informed decisions or less biased decisions, more based on a more objective reality, if you will. And you can't really get a super, I don't believe any one human can have the most objective reality, because you're just one human and the whole human experience is billions of data point and you're just one data point, so your sample size is just one. So that's where I say, our naive realism is going to be there. I don't think you can cure it because you are one data point, but nonetheless, it is still a data point, and we can still try to look at our own experiences and identify our biases and see, well, first of all, if the bias isn't really affecting your life, then why do anything about it? But some biases might be affecting your life. Like, for example, maybe there's a group of people that you've never really interacted with, but you have all these beliefs about them, so you avoid them. So maybe you find out that they're actually really nice and you make all these new friends. That's what I'm saying by we can correct for biases. Maybe we're exhibiting these biases that we're not even aware of. And that actually brings up the next topic. I'm going to type it in here because it's actually a cool topic. Let's type it into the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about here in the next couple of seconds, implicit versus explicit bias. This is a cool topic to talk about, and it's interesting to study it too, especially implicit bias. But before we talk about implicit versus explicit, let me read this comment. Identifying biases is really hard, though. At least, oh yeah. Yes. Oh, you just tapped into a huge bias, a cognitive bias, and this is one that I want to study myself. The bias of numbers. People don't understand big numbers. That's already been studied. Big numbers, like a million people, the human mind doesn't really understand what a million really means. Actually, through gaming, I feel like I started really understanding certain big numbers, like, oh my god, a million of this, because there's some games that where you're grinding and you're getting a resource and you're getting one at a time and something requires a million. And a lot of my friends will be like, I can grind that. That'll just take me a couple of weeks. Then you realize what a million actually means when you're grinding and you're getting one piece every minute or something. What a million minutes actually means, and your brain starts to go, oh my god, a million is a lot. So yeah, with numbers, people are not the greatest. And statistics, this is something I also like to remind people on social medias, because when people are going about their huge biases, right, or they'll have these they're going on these fallacies and they go, oh, statistics don't lie, statistics don't lie. A lot of people like to chirp that online, and usually I find that people who say that don't actually understand statistics. Because yes, statistics can lie. People can lie. Therefore, if I'm the person going to report statistics, I don't have to report the right statistics. I can fudge my numbers if I want. Who's going to stop me? Who's going to check? If you don't understand, this is where I say knowledge is power. If you can't understand statistics, I have power over you in that I can present whatever statistics I want and sell whatever story I want. And I can present it in a way that my statistics are still mathematically valid. But it would be invalid to science because I used the wrong statistic or reported the wrong statistic. And let's give an example. For the uninitiated, is the base rate fallacy. Oh my gosh, that sounds familiar. Let me Google that really quick. That one sounds really familiar to me. I feel like that's a classic base rate fallacy. Let's learn about this one. Base rate, they argue that many judgments relating to likelihood or cause and effect are based on how oh my gosh! So this is related to the representative heuristic. So you just tapped into something representative heuristic. This is a social psychological principle, another mental shortcut. The ones that we were talking about at the beginning of the chat, mental shortcuts and heuristics. The representative heuristic is a mental shortcut that we use when estimating probabilities. When we're trying to assess how likely a certain event is, we often make our decision by assessing how similar it is to an existing mental prototype. The problem is your mental prototype is based on a very low sample size. So you can get this base rate fallacy. That's so cool. That's very cool. Very, very cool. Very cool. These are, yeah. These are a lot of biases that we can be aware of. You're coming at this is another one. That's another heuristic. If you're really interested in knowing about more, there's about 28 I think at this point that are heavily studied in social psychology. So we can look up list of cognitive biases. I spelled cognitive wrong, but it doesn't matter. We're going to here and look at this beautiful list. Anchoring bias is one that salesmen like to use. So businesses will use anchoring bias when you're bartering for things, right? The anchoring bias. Availability heuristic. This one helps us explain the type of bias where you say what's more dangerous, going in an airplane or going in a car. People tend to say airplane because what they remember is airplanes are reported in the news, but car crashes are not. Well, it's because car crashes don't sell. Airplane crashes do. But if you look at the number of airplanes in the air currently, let's look at that. Current flights in air map. If we look at all the flights currently in the air, and then you see how many crashes are happening a day, none a day with all of these flights every single day, the probability that you get into a plane crash is very, very, very low. But the car crashes, every single day there's a car crash in big cities. Every single day there's multiple car crashes. Therefore, the probability of getting into a car crash it's higher than the plane crash. But the availability heuristic has it that because you're only exposed to the news really with plane crashes, but not so much car crashes, you're more likely to remember the plane crashes. Because the car crashes aren't even being reported, that would be the availability heuristic. Is you're basing your perceptual bias is formed based on your availability to data, and your availability to data is in this case would be through the news, and the news will only report things that are newsworthy. Therefore, airplane crashes. But we can see here that this is currently right now. It's not like flights over the past week. This is right now. Flights right now. It's pretty crazy. So cognitive dissonance. We've talked about cognitive dissonance on this channel. It's an awesome thing to talk about. It has a lot of biases that come out of cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias. Anyway, here's the list. You can Google this one. I recommend it. You can learn a whole lot about human behavior, and you can actually start to implement it in your daily life. Sometimes you can catch it in other people. Sometimes you can test it in other people. Like you can test the anchoring and adjustment heuristic, right? The anchoring and adjustment heuristic is where, like, let's just say we're bartering for something, and I want you to spend about $1,000. So if I were to say, give me $1, then you would definitely say no to 1,000 because you're anchored on one, like, wow, so cheap. But if I said, give me $1,700 or $1,700, and then when we negotiated and we went down to 1,000, that's going to seem a lot better to you than if we negotiated from one, right? So we can anchor you around a term, and then we can move around, but we're anchored around whatever term I chose at the beginning. So that's a tactic that a lot of businesses will use. So this is another way that when you're aware of cognitive biases, you cannot fall victim to businesses that use these ways in predatory business ways. So let's read this. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder how what you described regarding personal low sample size interacts with their numerical reality. I think that's what is part of the feeding there. Let me finish reading this. The usual example for base rate fallacy in mathematics is drunk driving. Okay, interesting. Assume 1% of people drives drunk at any given moment. Assume your test is 99% correct. Wait. Okay. Assume 1% of people drives drunk at any given moment. Okay, so if I have 100 drivers, one person is drunk. Okay, I always like to use the number 100 when I'm understanding statistics. I'm going to think out loud. Just I can shut up if people need me to, but I like to think out loud so people see the logic I'm applying here. So assume your test is 99% correct. So if I were to run this test 100 times, 99 of the times, there's going to be one drunk driver. Okay, and I'll skip what correct means here. Okay. Turns out you'll get, I think I know what you mean by correct, but it doesn't seem to be relevant. Turns out you'll get way more people that are not drunk as false positives rather than actually drunk people. Okay, and false positive here is when you, just so the channel, and let me just make sure I have it right, a false positive in this case would be claiming someone is drunk when they actually were not drunk. That's crazy. In at least in our statistics, we call that a type 1 error. So we have different types of errors in statistics. I'm going to pull that up really quick just so we get a quick stats lesson. It's always nice to pepper in some stats here so we can learn a little bit of stats while we learn about some psychological phenomenon. Type 1 error and type 2 error. Type 2 errors, you missed it. That type 2 error is more relevant to the researchers. It won't apply to your daily life. Type 1 error, so this is going to get really statistical, so maybe I made a mistake. I just wanted to bring up this image. This is really the image I wanted to bring up. A type 1 error in science is when you're wrong, like you get a false positive. So that's a false positive is like telling someone who's clearly a man that they're pregnant. Like, yeah, you're pregnant. Like, no, but your test is like your statistics are saying yes, you're pregnant, but it's clearly a man that cannot be pregnant, and so that would be a type 1 error. A type 2 error is like telling someone who's clearly pregnant you're not pregnant. So that means you missed the effect, you missed it. So the type 1 error is the one that's more relevant here of that type of error. But anyway, let me read. We do the same. True, false, yeah, positive, negative matrix. Yep. Yeah. Very cool. That's really cool. So you guys know, yeah, that's very cool. So I'm glad our sciences or our fields kind of had these overlapping notions, like the base rate fallacy. I didn't call it that, but I knew it pinged something. I was like, I've heard this before because someone else has talked to me about this. Because when I talked about availability heuristic from the social psychological standpoint, they're like, that sounds like the base rate fallacy or something like that. And so you brought it up. I'm like, yeah, it sounds familiar. So to social psychology, we call it the availability heuristic. And under all these heuristics, there's even more biases. There's so many cognitive biases out there. I really recommend whenever you have free time that you learn about cognitive biases. I don't know all of them, but I do study some of these. I do work with some of these. And I know we weren't entirely finished talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect, but if you have more comments or questions about this graph, or you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to talk about it, because we were about to start transitioning into implicit versus explicit bias in social psychology and social neuroscience, what that means and how it's studied. Explicit is very straightforward. The implicit one is a lot of fun to study, because you're getting, basically implicit is the type of behavior that you're not aware of. So a lot of data that businesses collect, like Google and all that stuff, they're collecting a lot of implicit data from you. They're tracking your behavior, but it's not like you track your own behavior. Like your brain's not keeping a mental track of everything you visited online and everything you've said. You don't have that memory, but they do. And that data will reveal some biases in your behavior that they can study patterns in your behavior, and those patterns are called biases, and this is called an implicit bias, because you're not doing it with an active purpose for your things. You're just kind of behaving in a normal way to yourself, or natural way to yourself. How are cognitive biases classified, both in experiment and in theory? Like, what makes a cognitive bias different to another? That's a really, really good question. How you delineate from them? To answer that, it's really tough. So, because the problem with, or I don't want to call it the problem, the fun thing or the complicated thing, I see it as a fun thing, but the complicated thing about science like social psychology is that your terms are very abstract. Versus physics, you can deal with physical objects that behave by physical laws that won't really change on you. Human behavior is very complicated, and the brain, we don't understand it. It's very complicated, and produces behavior that's wild. And so you get so much variance, you get so much variability in behavior that it's quite tough to get alpha. I don't know if you guys use alphas or if you use sigmas. We use alpha levels to dictate like our certainty. So we use like an alpha level of 0.05, so we're 95% sure of our phenomenon, versus physics has to use, or they don't have to, but they use an alpha level 0.001. Ours is 0.05. Theirs is 0.001. So when they're establishing theories and laws, they're 99.999% sure that they're correct. We're only 95%. That's what we accept in social psychology because we're just too new. It's too infant of a science, to be honest. And so, with that being said, I bring that up because these concepts, yeah, we don't have, well, to my knowledge, maybe a cognitive psychologist knows better than I do. But to my knowledge of what I've understood of cognitive psychology is there isn't really strict lines between these biases. A lot of the times they overlap. They actually are very related to each other, and sometimes they're one and the same. And it was just the egos of the researchers wanting to have fame, and so they called it one way, and another researcher called it a different way, and they wanted to be famous, and so they both got their things published, and now the science is stuck with two different terms that actually mean the same thing. That's a problem, and I like to mention these stories because this science is composed of humans. So going back to the original topic of bias, science can be biased. So as a consumer of knowledge, just remember, like, cross-reference your things as well. You might be getting fed some science, and it might be valid science, but it's always great to get cross-references. So this is where I also like to point people when you are reading science, if it's peer-reviewed, beautiful. Like that's beautiful. Peer-reviewed means multiple scientists have read this, and these scientists are independent from each other, and they've read it. Sorry, and they have read it, and they agree, or they have allowed this publication to proceed. I don't know empirical science. I don't do empirical science, so I don't know about alpha levels. Oh, I just do proofs. Oh, so, okay, you're really a mathematician then. Holy cow. Okay, okay. So in empirical science, yeah. So I apologize then. You're seriously, yeah. You're doing way more advanced math than I am. Then I'm doing the empirical science stuff. So I do the statistical models and that type of stuff. So alpha level, in statistics for us, it means the probability of committing a type 1 error. So the type 1 error is that false positive, right? So what's that probability of committing that false positive? We accept a 5% probability. We're like, okay, we're willing to accept 5% that there's a 5% chance that what we found, if we found an effect, there's a 5% chance that it was by pure chance, that it wasn't actually due to our experiment. Physics has the alpha, so our alpha level is 0.05. 0.05 times 100 is 5%, right? So physics, the one I was mentioning, they do 0.001. So they're 99.999% sure. So they accept 0.001% probability that what they found was just due to randomness, like a fluke or a type 1 error. Yeah, yeah, we're just gonna ignore that portion for now. I don't want to get into nitty gritty because yeah, reviewers can be pardon the language. They can. Actually, I'm not gonna use harsh language. Reviewers can be tough, and some of them can be quite biased. Politics exists in science as well. It can get political. That's a problem. I wish it wasn't that way, but humans get political. And what I mean by that is you can sway people to publish your thing. You can produce bad science and get it published if you know the right people, right? That exists in science too. Bad science exists. It's out there. But I just like to add on all these layers, like peer-reviewed, that it's being published by a reputable journal. So the more of these things we can check off our list, the less likely it is that it's horrible science. Like the more likely you're reading good science. So we just try to increase our probability of encountering good science by, looking for peer-reviewed articles, making sure that they're being published in reputable areas that have a good reputation, that don't have a reputation of producing bad science, that type of stuff. That are backed by a lot of the times when it's backed by pretty big foundations like National Science Foundation, those grants, they don't like to play around with their money. They like to back up good science. Oh, another thing that I do want to mention, I'm going to have to write this one down. This is something that's really cool that science is doing now. Open Science Framework. Open Science Framework. If it's published under Open Science Framework, it's even more trustable because this is making it that people need to be honest with their science now. I'm not going to get into what that really means now. I actually did have a stream, a Science Friday, talking about open science and our push to open science because there's a lot of cheaters in science. That happens. There's a lot of bad science out there. And we talked about that, how that happens in science and what we're doing about it. And open science framework is something that us researchers, this is what we're doing about it. This is our response to the cheaters. This is our push to try to get better science out there. Yeah, yeah, you know about P. Yeah, we call it P hacking. Let me see. Please tell me about the most fun flame wars in your field. I don't by flame war like there's so there've been I think by flame wars you mean like if scientists have kind of been at each other's throats. One of them is this there's a topic on perception, actually today's topic, perceptual bias, and they're trying to understand, well, how does perception actually work? Top-down versus bottom-up processing. And so top-down processing is you're accessing your memory to influence your current thoughts, and bottom-up is your environment is influencing you in a certain way to have certain thoughts. So for example, a bottom-up process would be, I feel hungry, my body's telling me to go eat, so my behavior is going to be influenced by external kind of things, meaning I'm hungry. But a different thought process like, oh, I'm going to judge this group. I think this whole group is violent. That is a top-down process because I'm basing that probably on stereotypes, and I'm accessing history about that group of my mind. So that I don't even have to have those people in the room with me, but I can still have beliefs about groups of people. So that's a top-down process. And so there's these scientists that say like how much those two processes are involved, how much like our perception, and there's all this debate, and it gets pretty crazy, the debates between those teams. Yeah. Yeah, they'll stand up and be like, "This is ridiculous." That's happened. Like you'll be at a conference and someone's like presenting their data and be like, "Yeah, your data is flawed or your data is invalid. You didn't collect it the right way or you asked the wrong questions." Like they'll rip into each other from time to time. I haven't really seen it very often, to be honest. They're very respectable to each other, but it has happened. It's happened in conferences and it's happened in like meetings. Do you have a named camps in your science? I don't know what you mean by camps. Yeah. And that p feuding, yeah, we call it p hacking in our science when you're. And so just to explain to the channel really quick what we mean by p hacking. So in statistics, we're really concerned over a value called the p value. The p-value, p stands for probability, and the p-value is kind of like your probability that if you found an effect is due to, so it's very related to the alpha thing, the thing I was mentioning earlier. It's like the probability that, this is a fluke, that what you found is an absolute fluke. And so you want it as small as possible. So like a p-value of 0.000001 is beautiful. You're like, wow, the probability that I got stupid lucky is so super low. Like this means that my evidence is supporting my hypothesis. Because a lot of science, we have to remember, it's under this notion called hypothesis testing. So empirical science follows assumptions under something called hypothesis testing. So to collect data, to do anything with it, you first have to have a hypothesis. If you didn't formulate your hypothesis before you ran an experiment, that is not science anymore. You have not performed science. You have to have a hypothesis first. And so the p-value tells you, did you get lucky that your data supported your hypothesis, or did the data actually support your hypothesis? Like, are the data actually supporting them? And so that's what the p-value tells us. And so p-hacking is a way to cheat so that your p-value turns out to be exactly what you wanted it to be, which is cheating, absolute cheating in science. That's not allowed, but a lot of people do this. I don't want to say the majority of scientists, but there have been a lot of publications out there that later, when they were retested, they found that p-hacking was happening. Okay. The dumbest argument we have is whether mathematics is discovered or invented. Oh, the former are called Platonists. Turns out you need a hypothesis before data because yeah, exactly, because you're gonna be biased. Heyo. It's exactly right. You need to have your hypothesis. I am so glad we're talking about bias. It just keeps coming up without even trying. Bias keeps coming up. Yeah, you need to have your hypothesis first because otherwise you're going to interpret your data in a favorable way that confirms that you can then formulate your hypothesis based on what the data say. And that's a bias. That's not right. You're supposed to formulate your hypothesis first. If we just Google the scientific method, right? It's not a joke to us. We follow it very serious. Like it's not like we skip these things. We always ask our question. We always have a research question. Without your research question, what are you doing? And then you got to do a background research. We don't just start going after the experiment immediately and formulating our hypothesis. We first have to go learn about the topic. Science takes a while because of these steps, right? Science takes time sometimes. Some science can be done fast, but our science, especially brain science, it takes a while because, oh my god, it's so hard. The brain is very complicated. That's what I mean by it's so hard. Doing this science, anyone can do it. It just requires work and time. You just got to put in the work and you can become a neuroscientist. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be a genius. Like, anyone can do neuroscience, really, and then you'll be a genius at neuroscience. You just got to put in the time, of course. But this is what takes us so much time, is we have to ask the question, why do people behave this way? We have to do the research. Oh, has anyone studied availability heuristics? Oh, they have. We're done. We have done science, by the way. Just so that all you viewers know, you have performed science if you finish at this stage, because that's part of the scientific process. You go to the background research. Did the background research answer your question? Did it? Yes? You're done. If it did not, continue. Construct a hypothesis. Well, why do you believe it's doing this way? And you got to base this. It's not just a wild guess. It's based on what you did learn. So what we currently know. That's where you formulate your hypothesis. So you formulate, you're like, okay, this is what we currently understand of the situation. So I think that this is happening because of this. Now you can test it with your experiment, collect your data, and go on and make your conclusions and blah, 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 blah. Whew. We still haven't gone implicit versus explicit because what I'm trying to do is I'm going to take a bathroom break, and so I'm going to use that as kind of like the transition. I'm using implicit and explicit this screen as kind of the transition for the bathroom break. But this conversation is really engaging. So Let's see. You see, that's why maths is easy. All I need is whiteboard, coffee, or beer. Oh, you're so lucky. I mean, no, I do drink beer when I work too. Never mind. I was gonna say you're so lucky, but then again, I also drink beer when I'm working sometimes. And copious amount of understanding from my neighbors. Frustrating yelling. Oh, that's good. But you probably have some logic, and you are what feeds us, right? We need to use our language that we use for logic is math. That's what statistics is. Statistics is just applied math. So you're coming up, you're inventing the language, and then we get to use your language. And we apply your language to understand nature, because that's the way biology tries to understand nature is math, right? We try to apply math to our nature to understand it. That's why physics has a lot of formulas. It's all math. We can use math to understand the nature. Math to me is another language. I don't see it as a different to me, this is a personal thing. I'm not saying they actually are this way. To me, math is just another language. Like the way the brain learns things, I just approach math the same way I approach a language. When I was learning German, how do you learn a language? All you got to do is keep speaking it, and you're gonna get better. Well, that's the way you do math. Just keep doing math problems, and you're gonna get better at it. I just get to make shit up, but then it's gonna get tested. Well, hopefully, I don't know. I don't know enough about your science to really know what you do, but I just appreciate that there's people like you, because I think I don't know. I feel like I could do that. I'm just a fascinated I'm fascinated by a lot of topics. I just like learning, so maybe I could do your thing, but maybe I couldn't either. I might get too frustrated. I don't know. And then giggle gleefully when the actual scientists are like, "The fuck? How many Greek letters are there?" Yeah. Like, what are you speaking? I like how in English there is a saying like it's all Greek to me, and here it's literal as well as metaphorical here. It's all Greek to me. In English, for the non-native English speakers, that saying, an English speaker will say it's all Greek to me when you present them with something, even if you're saying in English, but it made no sense to them. It's a common response. No, it's I don't actually hear it as common anymore on the streets anymore. But people will say like, "Oh, it's all Greek to me." So, and here it's literally Greek to me. Um, but we do use Greek letters and stats, of course. Uh, so some of it I'll understand. A lot of it I will not understand. I'm not a trained mathematician. Okay, I'm gonna go take that bathroom break. Fam, I ran out of Greek letters long ago. I know too much of the Hebrew. What? You guys had to go to the Hebrew alphabet? What? Fractor? What is? I didn't know. Okay, I have not had to go there. I haven't run out of the Greek alphabet letters yet. We haven't run out yet. I will say what's annoying is that across different sciences, sigma will mean different things, delta is going to mean different things, lambda is going to mean different things. So that's been kind of annoying. There's inconsistencies there. Or I guess I should say there's reusage of the same letters. I don't know how great that is because our sciences, from my experience, are becoming more and more interdisciplinary. They're starting to bleed more and more into each other. And so now I think some sciences are going to start to hit that conflict of like, wait, lambda to you means that? It means wavelength to me. Oh, shoot. All right. We can nerd on shitpost later for sure. I'm gonna take the break right now, and then we're gonna continue talking. We don't have to talk about implicit versus explicit, but that was the last little portion. I wrote myself down some things to talk about on the channel today, so I wouldn't forget. And that was the last little point I want to talk about. We don't have to talk about it today, but if we have nothing to talk about, that's what we'll talk about. So stay tuned. I'm gonna take like a 3-minute break so I can go to the bathroom and get some water, and we will be back shortly. right. All right, all right. We are back from our break. Let the countdown timer take us. Yes, welcome back. So, I have these comments. I was already reading these comments a little bit. It's really interesting. So I'm going to read this out loud so that way the stream can hear it too for anyone just listening. So the comment is the way maths research works is really fairly easy. Either you're researching something that's actually used, and then you're quite often subject to something similar as regular science. Makes sense. Not the usual hypothesis testing, but rather whether what you built is actually usable. That's really interesting to me. That sounded cool. It's like, okay, I feel that. And then there's pure mathematics, and it's often okay, but what if this breaks established concept in new and fun ways? Ooh, that sounds cool. And sometimes eventually you get something pretty cool out of it. Yeah, that sounds like you get some pretty cool stuff out of it. Like prime numbers have been researched for a long time. Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine they've been around for a while, with pretty much no practical use. Yeah, sure. I don't use prime numbers in my daily life. Now the internet relies on them in the form of cryptography. For better or for worse, just any case, cryptographers are reading this. Okay. I did not know that. Needless to say, I'm the latter camp. Oh, I see. Then just does weird abstract nonsense. That's really cool, though. I'm the latter camp. I don't know say later. The latter camp. Which, just question. And again, you don't have to answer anything if you don't feel like it. But are you doing your master's in English or in German? Are you in the German-speaking part of? I didn't even ask that. Are you in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, or do you just happen to know Swiss German? I didn't ask any of those things. Pardon my manners. I also don't like to put people on the spot. I'm like, tell me where you're from and who you are and all your information and your credit card information now. I'm not gonna do that. Oh, cool. See, I haven't been to Switzerland yet. I've only been to Geneva, and like, I haven't been through the country, and I see a lot of pictures of Switzerland. Every time there's like nature pictures, it's Switzerland. Okay, that's cool. So you're doing it in English. That's so cool. Yeah. Cause so that's very cool. Okay, this isn't a secret or anything. This is way off topic from our chat, but since we're chatting about Europe right now, or at least your program that's in English. After I'm done with my PhD, my plan is to go to Europe. Actually, I'm trying to move over there to work over there as a researcher and hopefully as an academic. At least I don't fully know how academia works in Europe. We do get a lot of European visitors here. And I lived over there and I did the research into master's programs. I don't know what academia looks like. So I don't know yet. I'm gonna apply all over Europe. Germany for me would be great because I've already lived in Germany, so I wouldn't feel like such a foreigner. Like I'm always gonna feel like a foreigner because I'm not German. But I had a great time my first time living there. But I'm open to living because I know so Netherlands. My lab works with Netherlands actually. There's a lab in the Netherlands. We have worked with a lot, and so there I already have some connection to it. So and also Netherlands does really good work in neuroscience. U.S. is actually really strong in neuroscience. I think they've been consistently rated as the top country for neuroscience for a while. It started wavering a little bit. I don't want to get political here, and I don't want to get into countries being better or worse. To me, if you're doing science and you're doing the stuff that I like, I want to be there. Like I don't care what country, I want to be there, and I want to do that science and have some fun. But Netherlands is among the best countries as well to do neuroscience, and so that's very cool. Germany is great, but it's also great because I also have a cousin that lives in Germany. Same as the U.S. Okay, less bullshit with tenure track versus none and pay gap. Ooh, day-to-day same thing. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because actually, yeah, I was gonna say like I don't know if they do tenureship in Europe. Because yeah, there's a lot of stuff you have to do here for tenureship. It's crazy. The one thing I heard about German academia though is that it's very hierarchical, in that like there's like a principal researcher and they dictate the research and everyone else is working under them, and that post won't be like you can't get that post until that person basically leaves, and so it's like it takes you forever to do that type of research. I don't know if someone had like their lab experience was just that and that's not applicable to all of Germany, but that's what I've been told by one person. But again, that's one person's data point. That's an n equals one. Um, as I do really admire the American education system in this regard. There's many reasons why I want to move to Europe. A lot of those reasons aren't for a professional reason. It's because I really like life over there. I'm very biased, if you want. But since we're talking about bias, I just really enjoy living there. I felt really at home. I liked just the cities. I like history a lot too, so it's really cool being around all that history. Um, Not to say that I'm not around history where I'm at, where I grew up. I grew up in part of my childhood was spent in Mexico, and that has a lot of history. That's why I speak Spanish, because I am Mexican. But anyway, I'm getting way off topic. Germany is a bit special since professors are officials on this subject to government pay scale. Oh, interesting. And there's similar concept and distinction between the. Okay, this is very important. I'm so glad you came today. Thank you so much. this is this is so helpful. I am like this is another reason I don't want. I hope this doesn't sound like I'm bragging because this isn't bragging. I do just want to like have this moment of like of pride, I guess. That this is another reason why I wanted to open this channel wasn't only to share what I like, like my passion. My passion is science, and right now it's particularly neuroscience. Like that's what I can share. I can't share, like I love OChem and I love talking about it, but I'm not an expert on it. That's not what my PhD is, so I don't feel comfortable sitting here and talking about organic chemistry. If we want to talk about it off the stream, yeah, sure. I love OChem, but I'm not an expert. But so one thing that I also wanted to happen in this channel is to get other experts, well, actually that's a side point, to get other experts to come in and I can talk with them and ask them questions, and it's happening. I mean, it's already happened before, but this is really cool because this is really relevant to something that's going to happen in my very near future. Because I'm near the end of my PhD. I'm about to collect data for my dissertation. And that data is going to go fast. Well, at least I hope so. And so basically, in about a year, I'm looking to graduate and have my doctorate. Flock of undergrads. That's awesome. Oh man, I read. Okay, let me read that out loud. That's awesome. However, at least in Switzerland, because I haven't actually investigated much about Switzerland, and I'll explain why in a second. It's not that I didn't think about it. I'll say in just a second, but let me just read this comment. However, at least in Switzerland, whether you are a lecturer or professor, pay is good. Yeah, I would expect that from Switzerland, just based on everything I hear about that country. Work is hard. I don't mind hard work. Research has happened. Yeah, that's awesome. That needs to be happening. And you also got to deal with I like this. I like the way you ended the sentence. You also got to deal with a murder, a crowd, a flock of undergrads. I don't mind undergrads at all. That's something that I really like about my graduate experience right now. And I'm about to get back to Switzerland, the thing, don't worry. The one thing I'm really enjoying about my graduate program is that not only that am I being trained as a researcher, but we also have to teach. That's actually how we get paid. So my doctorate is free. I haven't had to pay. It's free. It's free. I'm not going to say it's free. It's free. And by that I mean, so the government does subsidize a portion of my education here, so it's government funded, but also I work. And the form of work that I have to do, that like I get paid, so I get something called a stipend. So I do get a paycheck. So I get actually paid to get my doctorate. So I not only have it for free, it's from taxes. I not only have it for free, but I'm getting paid to get trained as a scientist, and that payment comes because I do actually have to put in work, and that's not research. That's not the work that I have to put in. We have to teach. And so something that I've really enjoyed, and actually because I was really enjoying teaching in the classroom, that led me to I have so many motivations as to why I opened this channel. Like they all stacked up on me. Like I didn't instantly just decide to start streaming. It took me about like a year of thinking of whether I wanted to or not, because as a grad student, I'm sure you know, Graph here. I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce your name in a very American way. I'm really sorry. It's just, I feel weird sometimes breaking and having to go like Graf, or that's how I would pronounce it in German, which is also probably wrong. But like I have a lot of people that have Hispanic names because I'm Mexican, and it's sometimes weird to swap into Spanish and then back into English. So I apologize for the pronunciation. But anyway, um, Oh shoot, let me see. I just got thrown off topic. I don't have to teach as part of my program. Oh yeah, I was talking about teaching. I don't have to teach as part of my program. I still do my free time though. Nice. Undergrads are interesting. Sometimes they're the most amazing people. Curious. Yes. And sometimes yes. Yes. Yeah. You get a distribution of behavior, and I think something that I get like not that I'm trying to one up you or anything. I'm not meaning this in any way like that. But it is sometimes fun. Maybe you've already done this to like because I study the social psychology and I know of these cognitive biases and I know of social situations. I know of theories within mate attraction, right? And I'm a big fan of evolutionary psychology. I think if I had to redo my life, I would first, if I had to redo my education, I would first become an organic chemist, for sure. Like, I would just go into organic chemistry, to be honest. I love it so much. But the other one would be an evolutionary psychologist. That's not to say I can't do it. I'm still planning on studying organic chemistry, called OChem, and I'm still planning on doing way more work in evolutionary psychology. But I do know a lot of theories from evolutionary psychology, and a lot of the theories kind of explain mating strategies between males and females. And so it's really interesting to be seeing that these theories at work in front of you as a teacher. You see these young people, who are full of all these hormones, and the awesome thing is you're teaching them about this stuff to them, and they're still behaving by it. It's so interesting. You're like, all right, so this is how your brain works under these hormones that actually in your age group, these are the hormones that are present in your brain, and they are going to elevate your likelihood of behaving like this, behaving like this. And then you actually sit there for a little bit and you see those behaviors happen, and you're like, I love science. I love its ability to predict behavior. It's so cool. Anyway, let me read these. Let me see. At least I don't have to grade. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, as a professor, you don't have to grade, but so sometimes I am the professor. Sometimes I'm a teacher's assistant, which means that the professor gets to teach and I have to do all the grading. And this is how I get paid. So just going back to that loop, I get paid because we teach. So this is how we get paid. If I didn't teach, I wouldn't get paid. But there are many, many ways. Just for anyone that is really is interested in grad school, in the U.S. at least, there are many ways to get funded, so that way you don't have to teach either, and you can just focus solely on research. Because a lot of people go to PhD to do research, other people do it to also become an academic, meaning you're also going to teach. And I have found that I really love teaching. So to close another loop, I found that through teaching all these classes that I've done, I found that I actually really, really like teaching, and that was an added motivation on top of my other motivations to open this channel, because I'm like, yeah, I'm comfortable speaking in front of people. Like, I can admit when I don't know stuff. I openly do with my students, and it always makes it a way better interaction between us, because I don't like professors that will like they pretend like they know absolutely everything, because they can't. I mean, it's good that they know a lot. They need to know a lot because they're the ones teaching you, but it's also good to also acknowledge our limitations. That way we don't cross any lines, and by that I mean we don't misinform people. That's something that I am like really sensitive to. I can't it's a pet peeve of mine. I don't know where it came from, but disinformation really bothers me, and I think it's because I've dedicated my life to science, and science is the pursuit of like knowledge through evidence. And so disinformation is like the exact opposite. It's what destroys us. And so we're working hard every day to like to try to get science out there, and then disinformation works against us. So I think that's probably why it causes me it's a pet peeve of mine. Yeah, it's the Dunning-Kruger, right? So when professors go like, "No, I'm not an expert," I'm like, "You probably are." Like when they start saying those things, like you probably know a lot of stuff, because you can acknowledge that you don't know a lot of stuff too. Because when you can acknowledge that, you start to understand. You really understand the topic we're talking about, because you understand what it's not, and that's such an important step in mastery. When you understand what it's not, it's that, and to understand what it's not requires so much failure. And that's like everything's tying together here. That's the imposter syndrome and stuff like that. We're gonna get to implicit versus explicit in a second, but this is an interesting conversation here. Oh, I missed a comment here. I follow the XKCD scale of science. Chem is mega scary. I don't know if I can post links, so in case you don't know, okay, I'm gonna type this down again. Let's pull up. So I'm gonna do this on YouTube, so I can remember where I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna put this in the quotation marks. And then the other one is XKCD, purity of science. Sweet, purity of science. Nice. If you don't know that, just Google XKCD, purity of science. I'm gonna Google this. So I'm gonna say I have to Google this one. Google this later, dude. I called my future self dude. I'm just talking to myself right there. Google this later, dude. All right. Yeah, teaching is really cool. I really enjoy it. Some of my fellow grads, something that was happening to me, I couldn't get over this for a little bit. This is part of my like struggle of imposter syndrome, and like having to overcome this part of imposter syndrome was that I'm so into teaching that so in the U.S. I don't know if this it happens in Europe, but in the U.S. as teachers and teaching assistants, we have to do something called office hours. And office hours is basically where we sit in our office because we do have an office as grad students, and our doors open to any student in the class, and we have to hold minimum 2 hours a week. And in those 2 hours, students can ask us whatever they want. It should be on the topic of the class, but it can be. I always tell them like, oh, if you want to talk about my research, we can talk about research. If you want to talk about joining other people's labs, I can help you get connected with other people's labs. But that's just my personal preference there. But mandatory, you have to provide this space where students can come and ask questions because it's really hard to understand 100% of the lecture 100% of the time every single time. You're not going to do it. So office hours is that time where you can go and just clarify certain things. So the strategy that I would recommend to undergrads, if I could tell myself a little strategy to really become to be more efficient student, so you can work smarter, not harder, is instead of trying to write down absolutely everything that the professor is saying, because that's going to be the tendency people will do, the bias here. You start writing down in short. You start to develop a shorthand notion first, but also write down the parts you're not understanding. Because the parts you're understanding, you're probably after you get a good night's sleep. We already talked about sleep last week. We talked about sleep. We talked about how important sleep is for memory and consolidation of memory, and for overall well-being and health. We talked about this. So, and if you didn't see it, I'm going to upload it to the YouTube channel. All the previous Science Fridays and previous Taco Tuesdays are on the YouTube channel. Which I think the link is below my about if you want to see that YouTube channel. You don't have to follow me or anything. I use that to archive these talks. That way people, if you did want to listen to the conversation about certain things like sleep, I talked about last week why we need sleep, kind of the mechanisms of sleep, things that disrupt our sleep, and yeah, the implications of sleep and how really important it is to our health and our overall well-being and our overall lifespan too. But anyway, I digress. Man, I just got totally off topic. I'm gonna catch up on the comments then, because then you know what you still need to learn. Exactly. Yeah. When you know exactly what it isn't, then you still also know. Thank you so much for the follow. Yeah. When you don't know what you. Okay, now I have to rephrase that. I got distracted, but thank you so much. There's that whole like sound bit. I made that GIF. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, I don't have the best skills in animation, so I'm proud of that one because because I was able to animate something for the channel. I'm not I don't have all the time in the world, so I would love to put so much more work into this channel and make it look way more professional and pristine and all that. But I am a PhD student, so I'm just gonna have fun with this and slowly build this again. All right. Have a great night. Thank you so much for the interesting conversation. I have to get back to everything else I was talking about. But thank you so much. I know I like to cut myself off so many times, but thank you so much. I hope you have a good night. Yeah, I know in Europe it's got to be quite late or early, I guess, at this point. So thanks for joining me. And thanks for the follow. Again, no one's required to follow me. No one's required to sub. No one's required to do anything. I'm not asking that. I just appreciate a good conversation, and I appreciate anyone listening too, because yeah, for many reasons. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about implicit and explicit. So this has been a longer stream, and we're going to keep it going a little bit long. The streams tend to be about an hour long, but it's okay. I think this stream has been a really great stream. So thank you if you've been sticking by this whole time. Hopefully you've been enjoying it on this Friday evening. We are going to continue a little bit because I have this slide up, this implicit versus explicit, and I feel like I can't just not talk about that. So I'm going to try to make it a little bit brief. If anyone wants to step in and have the conversation about it, I can keep the stream going indefinitely. But I don't try to make these too long because I do upload to YouTube, and yeah, really large files are problematic. So sorry I have to do this, but before we start with implicit and explicit, I'm gonna go turn on the lights in my apartment because it's getting dark here. Yes, and by the way, I don't know if graph is a or graph. I don't know how to. I really. I'm gonna have to keep saying it in English. If you are gonna hear this, but it was also the pleasure was all mine. So thank you again. I hope you have a great night and you rest. Get some good sleep. We talked about that last week. Anyway, implicit versus explicit. So before I don't want to say before we begin because we're beginning. We're gonna go Google what implicit means. So we can start off with the definition. That's how we start everything in this channel. We kind of like to go to some sources to get some objectivity here, so that way we're not falling victim to naive realism, right? We talked about naive realism at the beginning. So implicit in plain English means implied though not plainly expressed. And when I say plain English, this means we're not talking about scientific terms. So science, I often like to say, is almost like its own language. When we say there are certain words that, although they might be in the language you speak, um, like in your everyday language, there's some words that are going to mean something drastically different to a scientist. So implicit here in plain English is implied though not plainly expressed. And so science will usually, borrow from the language that is being spoken, so in this case English, and then tweak the definition to put it into the scientific context. So within the context of social psychology as a science, implicit bias becomes, or implicit uh, meaning psychology, becomes something a little bit different. Behavior that cannot be observed directly, such as a cognitive process or emotional reaction. So we see how the definition changed a little bit, but it's based on this definition: implied, though not plainly expressed. So based on that definition, we have a more refined scientific definition for implicit. And so implicit means behavior that cannot be observed directly, such as cognitive process or emotional reaction. Cognitive process is happening in here. I can't tell what you're thinking, right? That's what we mean. So that's that information. So if you react to something, right, you might give an explicit emotional response. So explicit's the opposite of this, right? If implicit is cannot be observed, explicit means it can be observed, it can be noticed, it can be felt. So if you're doing a shock face, then you're giving me this explicit information that you're shocked, but there's implicit information as to why you're shocked. So that's what we mean by implicit versus explicit. So when we talk about implicit versus explicit bias, what we're really talking about is biases that you're aware of. So some people, they're gonna be like, I know I don't particularly like these types of people, right? Like whether it's a racial demographic, religious demographic, an opposing sports team demographic, doesn't matter. But we probably have some sort of bias against some groups. That's kind of the way we humans work in group. We have this kind of group mentality function in our brain. I don't fully understand it, but there is this seemingly chip or the seeming software that we have about group mentality and group behavior. And so there can be some biases there, and you're aware of it. But you're also aware, if you were living in a lot of Western countries, for example, let's take racism. To be racist is really frowned upon. And so you are aware of your bias, or that you might be, in this case, racist, but you also are aware that the norms say, hey, that's bad. And so you're not going to act out on it. And so you're going to suppress it. So that information is going to be implicit to other people, but explicit to yourself. Now, there also exists implicit bias to yourself. You might not be aware of certain biases you might have. This is where I was mentioning a little bit earlier about, Google and all these other social media platforms that track you and track your information. They're collecting data about you that you yourself don't probably know, because it's impossible. Well, it's nearly impossible. I don't want to say it's 100% impossible, but it's nearly impossible that you have a memory of absolutely everything you visited online and have said and have interacted with. But the computer has that memory. It can store it. This is why Google invests billions and all these other companies invest billions into their hardware and software, so they can keep track of all this data. To them, it's super valuable, because what they're doing is they're tracking your behavior over time. So now they can find patterns. They can find biases in your behavior that you're not aware of. So they can sell you stuff. They can put things at a certain price without you being aware of that these tactics are being implemented, because it's an implicit bias and it's implicit to yourself. So that's what we mean by implicit and explicit bias. So that's the quick little overview of implicit versus explicit bias. And then I'm just going to kind of start to wrap up the stream with giving you an example of a paradigm where we can measure implicit bias, because now some people are non-believers of science. They go, okay, well, who's ever gonna come into and openly say, yeah, I'm a racist and I'm a horrible human being, and give us? Well, those first of all, when I ask participants, if I'm the researcher and I'm asking participants directly on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate this group or how racist are you? That would be an explicit measure, because that's relying on people's own explicit knowledge of themselves. And so there we know people are going to lie to us. So we don't rely on those measures. Don't worry, everybody out there that isn't familiar with science. We're not stupid here in science. We know science, we've been at this for thousands of years. We've been refining the scientific process. We have a good process. It's so far been working out for us. Just look at all this awesome technology you have around you. If you're a non-believer in science, then get off your phones. Stop taking any sort of medications. Actually, just stop basically living in modern society. Go out to the woods, because most everything around you that is advanced from caveman times is due to science. So, sorry. And so that process as God is here, it's been great, and so we're using that in this instances. So we're not examining bias. A lot of the times we're not examining it by straight up just relying on people to be honest. We do sometimes give it to them, and then we compare their explicit rating to the implicit and see how much they lied to us. So how do we measure implicit bias, you might be asking, in a valid way, right? It's not any sort of hypnosis. We're not putting people to sleep and tapping into their unconscious. We're going to tap into their unconscious through kind of this methodological way. And so I'm going to probably need a recruit paint here to demonstrate. Oh, shoot. So we got our friend Paint here. So we did an experiment in our lab, and it's called the probabilistic reward task. You don't have to worry about the name. I would type it into here, but I don't think if you Google it. Actually, what happens if you Google it? Probabilistic reward task. There's the citation, Pizzagalli. Oh, okay. So let's read the definition. So I've used this task in my own lab to collect data and have analyzed the data, and it's awesome. I want to say it's a really awesome task, but I'm going to say this from the experimenter standpoint. For the participant, it's not that much fun. So the probabilistic reward task has been designed to provide an objective measure of reward learning. Or in other words, this is what the IE means, by the way. In other words, ability to modulate adaptive behavior as a function of reinforcement history. I'm going to unpack all these terms in just a second. And is a recommended assay to probe the positive valence system in the latest revision of the art. Okay, so we don't really have to do that, but it's an objective measurement of reward learning. So reward learning, meaning you do some action, and then the computer is either going to give you money. So reward here is money. That's what we are offering people. If you do this trial correct, and I'm about to go over what the trials are. If you do this trial correct, you get money. If you get it incorrect, you don't get money. Okay? So that's a reward history, where it says right here, adaptive behavior as a function of reinforcement history. That's the reinforcement history, is your brain keeps track of, oh, when I do this, I get money, and when I do this, I don't get money. So it starts to form some correlations there based on your behavior. So there, you're not having this active mind. So let me explain the task now, and then I'll describe why it's implicit, why it's not explicit, why we're able to measure an explicit, I totally misspoke, why we're able to measure an implicit bias using this task. So let's go to images, because this is it right here. This is the image we're going to look at. And so basically, the experiment asks people, you don't have to worry about the rat. The experiment asks humans, not rats, to sit in front of a screen, and they're going to be presented with one of two faces. First, the face is actually going to show up without a mouth. And let me actually see if there's a better slide. This one is a way better slide. Okay. So this is a diagram that shows flow over time. So this is the first screen, and then the screen would switch to this. So it's not that they're seeing all these images at the same time. It's that this arrow is the timestamp. It's telling you, and this is happening in 500 milliseconds, like this. It's really, really fast. This is part of how we know we're tapping into implicit information. It's because it's happening so fast, you don't have the chance, you don't have the time to think explicitly, to think consciously. You have no time. You have to react unconsciously, implicitly. So the X comes up. This helps participants cue, like put their attention on the right spot in the screen, because that's where the face will appear in the next 500 milliseconds. A face appears without a mouth appears, and then the mouth disappears, and then you have 500 milliseconds to make a choice. Was it a long mouth or a short mouth? And this is the difference between long mouth and short mouth. It's a difference of, so we're scientists, so we use the metric system. So it's a difference of 1.5 millimeters. And if you're not familiar with metric system, it's less than an inch, I think. It's really minimal. Here it looks a little bit more drastic. I think it's for presentation, but and you have to remember it flashes. It just flashes. It's not like on forever. It just goes boop. It just flashes. So you have to almost guess whether it was long or short. But it's semi-distinguishable, but really hard, and it's on purpose really hard. Why is it on purpose so hard? Let me finish the diagram. Sorry. So it'll ask you, was it a wide, was it a long mouth, or a short mouth? And you answer using your A key or L key. So A or L key, right? And we do a lot of things to correct for handedness, right? Because we can, again, we're scientists. We think about these things. We know some people are going to be right-handed, right? So they're going to be faster with the right hand. So there might be handedness effects. We control for that. Don't worry, stream. Don't worry. We control for that. So you get this option, and you get to choose. Was it a long mouth or short mouth? And depending on your answer, you're going to get a response from the computer. Correct, you won 10 cents. And because you're doing a lot of trials, so you can accumulate quite a bit of money, because you can get 10, well, at least that's what we paid, 10 cents per trial. Now, there's a couple of things I have to tell you, stream, that the participants don't know. And that's that the game is rigged. And the game is rigged on purpose, because it's rigged in such a way that one of the mouths, one of the sides, is going to reward them 3 times as often as the other mouth. That's on purpose, because what it should do, what a healthy human with a healthy brain should do, is they should pick up on this rigged game. Eventually, after doing so many trials, the brain starts to notice, the more I press the L, the more money I get. So on trials, so this is the reason why we need it to be hard, because it needs to be doable but hard enough for them to doubt a lot of their trials. So on those trials where they don't know which way to go for sure, they have no idea, they need to guess. And this is where bias will emerge. When they guess, do they tend to guess in one direction, or is it random? If they're tending to guess in one direction, that's bias, and that's called a response bias or a reward bias. And we're trying to implement the bias on purpose. This is why we rigged the game. And that's on purpose, because what we're doing is we're testing for anhedonia. It's a symptom of depression. And by doing this, we're not going to straight up ask people, and let's just define anhedonia really quick for those that are not aware of what that might be. Anhedonia is the inability to experience pleasure. So anhedonia is the cool. I almost said it word for word. Anhedonia is the inability to feel pleasure. It's a common symptom of depression as well as other mental disorders. So it's basically, you might have felt pleasure at some point doing some activities, and you've kind of lost that motivation to do it again. You don't feel pleasure out of it. Maybe certain foods, you stop feeling pleasure for that. That's a symptom. It doesn't mean you are depressed. To be depressed, to be diagnosed with depression, it requires like 17 or 18 things by the DSM. I'm not a psychiatrist, though. I'm not going to say anything about diagnosis right now. I'm not trained to diagnose people at all, but I am aware of these things. So I don't want to suggest that people in this chat or in this stream have depression because you lost the pleasure. There's also something called maturing. Our likes will change over time, but as long as you do like something, right, that's the important thing to really pay attention to. And the reason why we provide money in our experiment here is because on average, humans value money. They see it as a reward because it grants them, food. It grants them entertainment. It grants them a lot of things that they can enjoy that can provide a dopamine rush to the brain. So money becomes iconic of that reward. So money itself to the brain is a reward. So a healthy human brain should be processing, on average, the money as a reward. And so we've rigged it so that the healthy brain should notice, hey, the more I press this button on the trials that we don't know, if the more I press this button, the more money I get. So that should exhibit a bias. So a healthy brain should exhibit a bias. So this is why I like to talk about bias in a scientific method or scientific context, because this isn't a negative thing. This is actually what the average human should be exhibiting is a bias because we meant it to be that way. And so if you are still on these random trials, when you are guessing, if it's still randomized, that means the money reward isn't influencing your decision making at all. Like it just isn't. You're just immune to it. And you're either ignoring it because you don't care about money, or you're not even aware that the game is rigged. Again, a healthy brain will detect it. Now, none of the participants, because we probe them at the end, we have our ways of probing them to test if they knew what we were testing. None of them know what we're testing. They're all unaware that the game is rigged. They have no way of knowing because this is happening like this. This is why we know it's implicit. The brain is functioning on an automatic sort of way that you don't have to engage with your conscious thought. Because your brain, it's a very powerful computer. It's capable of running multiple softwares at the same time. There's unconscious processes happening right now. You're not telling your heart to beat. You're not telling your lungs to breathe unless you start to think about your lungs, but you never tell your heart to beat. But your brain is. Your brain is communicating that. Through your medulla oblongata, back here in the brain, it's communicating your body, do this, do that, do this. Those are all unconscious processes. So there's part of our cognitive components that are unconscious to us. There's part of our mental processes that we're not aware of, and we can tap into it using experimental data like this presented before you. What a great conclusion. Wow. that was not rehearsed. Now, I'm sorry. That is basically what I wanted to say about implicit versus explicit bias, how we can measure it. This is just one way of measuring a reward, a response bias in humans. You just have them play this game that's rigged, where a bias shows that they are following what the average human should be following in a healthy sense. And if they're not showing that response bias, or if they're an unbiased participant, then that might be indicative of anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure. Now, this experiment does not actually tell you, does not conclude whether you have anhedonia or not. It just gives you one data point in favor of, yeah, you might have anhedonia, but you have to test so much more. It cannot test. It's not a clinical diagnostic tool. This is a tool for measuring implicit bias, and this just happens to be in the realm of money as the reward. Any questions, comments, conversations, experiences are welcome. Otherwise, we're going to start to wrap this Science Friday up. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a long one. It's been a great one. Thank you. Today we got two follows today, so that was awesome. Thank you to the 2 follows. I hope to see you in the future streams. It isn't. I feel bad that this channel is going to be picking up momentum, and then it kind of dies off. The next 2 weeks, I won't be able to stream because I'm going to be getting married in Mexico. So I won't be able to have a computer. I won't. I mean, I'm not taking my setup here for streaming. So, yeah. I'll remind everyone on the Taco Tuesday that the streaming is gonna pause for a little bit. Anyways, thank you so much. Let's go here. No, I want to get to this. Where to go? Where to go? No. There we go. No. Where's my? I'm trying to get to my. There you are. Trying to get to this slide as we're closing down the thing. I'm just giving time for the stream to kind of catch up in case anyone wanted to have a last minute chat here. Cool. Let's put up a GG. Where's my GG? Oh, how do I do it? I forgot how to do it. No, I can do it. There we go. Let's put up a GG for the GG stream. Thank you everybody for joining me. Have an awesome weekend. I really hope this was an entertaining stream for everybody, as it was for me. I had a lot of fun. It was great to meet Graf Butler. I don't know how to. I'm sorry, Graf Blutvest. It was really nice to meet you. Hope to see you in future streams. And thank you everyone else for listening and stopping by. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. And if anyone's listening to a recorded version of this, I'm always going to say this. You're a champion. Thank you as well. It just continues to give me the motivation to continue uploading these videos to YouTube. Because now my channel, I noticed my channel doesn't retain the videos anymore. It used to retain all my videos for 30 days. And now it like deletes them like this. Like I guess I don't know why. I think it's because I'm not a Prime member anymore. That's probably why. That's the only thing that's changed since I used to have that and not, is that I'm no longer Amazon Prime member. So that might be why. Um, so, anyways, so I have to upload to YouTube, so that way these are archived somewhere. And so, thank you to anyone listening to the recorded versions, because I do go check the numbers. And I'm like, okay, are people listening? Like, should I be uploading? Because sometimes I'm really busy with, graduate school or real life stuff, and so the channel can be hard to upkeep from time to time. But that just motivates me to keep it up. And so, thank you, everybody. You're all champions. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Go out and think about some biases after this chat. Have a good one.
When you lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines, but always know that you'll be safe. I'll be here throughout your days. Come find me and we will play.